community college programs.
Nothing quite gets people's attention like free.
It was too good to be true. I mean, free money.
I'm finally getting my degree. I'm going for it.
But research shows their effects are limited.
The number one college affordability issue in this country is housing. And we're not talking about that.
The real cost of free on our podcast, College Uncovered. Listen today, wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm digital producer Alexi Cohan, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. It's Ask the Mayor Day with Michelle Wu. Before that, though, we're opening phone and text lines as Nantucket is set to vote on green lighting Airbnb rentals. We're asking you about the summer short-term rental economy, your Airbnbs, your Verbos. Are they a boon or a burden?
Payments are now among the 34 allegedly falsified business records Trump is being tried for. Trump has pleaded not guilty to all the counts, saying that he was only paying his lawyer. Prosecutors argue the payments from Cohen to Daniels violated New York campaign finance law. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, New York.
President Biden is scheduled to arrive on Capitol Hill at this hour. NPR's Tamara Keith reports the White House says during a ceremony the president will underscore the right to free speech while condemning anti-Semitism.
This year's ceremony comes as protests opposing Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza roil college campuses. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says Biden will say that while there is a right to free speech, there is no place for anti-Semitism.
He will speak to the horrors of October 7th, when Hamas unleashed the deadliest day for Jewish people since the Holocaust. And he will speak to how since October 7th, we've seen an alarming rise in anti-Semitism in the U.S., in our cities, our communities, and on our campuses.
She says Biden will also honor the memory of the 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust and recommit to heeding the lessons of history. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
The State Department completed a complicated global negotiation early this morning. It flew 12 people to the U.S. from Syria after they spent years in desert camps for refugees and relatives of Islamic militants. NPR's Sasha Pfeiffer explains.
These camps hold about 45,000 people from around the world, and they're fertile ground for extremists. So the U.S. is pressing other countries to bring their citizens held there home. Some countries don't want to because they're afraid these people are terrorists, but the U.S. says it would be worse to leave them there and risk them being radicalized.
NPR's Sasha Pfeiffer reporting. This is NPR News.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts' Child Welfare Agency says it will stop diverting federal funds intended for foster children. We have more from Adam Frenier.
Children who are due to receive survivor's benefits or disability payments instead had that money taken by the state to help cover the cost of their own care. The Department of Children and Families estimated that totaled $5.5 million a year, covering 600 children. But now those in foster care will have the money saved on their behalf, and they can access it when they return home or leave the child welfare system. Rachel Gowaltney is the executive director of the Children's League of Massachusetts, an advocacy group.
They have funds available for everything that a young person needs when they sort of graduate to adulthood, whether that's getting their first apartment or getting a car so they can get to work or to school.
While the state agency made the change on its own, there's pending legislation on Beacon Hill to make it permanent. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Adam Frenier.
Voters on Nantucket will weigh in on whether to regulate short-term vacation rentals at tonight's town meeting. The article is one of more than 100 on the town meeting warrant, and it's been grabbing headlines for months. Town meeting begins at 5 at Nantucket High School. In sports, the Celtics open the second round of the playoffs with the Cleveland Cavs at the Garden tonight. Tip-off is at 7. Go Gang Green. And the Red Sox are in Atlanta tonight for a game against the Braves. 71 degrees in Boston right now. Today, sun, lots of rain for the rest of the week, though. I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Details at CapitalOne.com. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, as we do every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thank you very much. And Michelle Wu is going to join us at 1 o'clock. She'll be here for an hour from 1 to 2 to take our questions and yours. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
So in any case, Marjorie and I decided, instead of discussing whether Trump should go to jail for violating gag orders, we do that almost every day, or what an outrage it is that there's not cameras in the courtroom to capture Stormy Daniels testifying against Trump this morning.
And what she's wearing.
And what... That's what Marjorie said, not me. We decided to ask you instead, on a beautiful spring day before the deluge begins tomorrow, we want to talk to you about summer travel plans. As Henry just said, Nantucket's long debate over short-term rentals might come to an end tonight with this town meeting vote on whether to legalize short-term rentals for good. Those who support them say they're essential to the island's tourism economy. Others argue the rentals take away from year-end housing, put stress on already limited local resources, and replace neighbors with strangers. Airbnb, like a ton of startups, launched years ago with the promise of disrupting the vacation industry by offering a more intimate, cheaper stay than a corporate hotel chain. But now, I think for most, that reality has shifted. Airbnbs often cost as much, if not more, than a hotel room. You're responsible for tidying up after yourself, and there's been much written about how they gut local neighborhoods. Venice, for example, Zoe was telling us this, arguably the tourist capital of the world, now has more short-term rental units than year-long residents. Short-term stays mean higher rents for people who actually live there, and they're getting priced out. Not to mention the illegal units, I've contended with this, where the instructions say, tell the neighbors your cousins visiting from out of state. Yeah, that's a good legal residency. So with summer around the corner, are you Airbnb-ing it, or are you reverting back to the traditional hotel option? And do you Airbnb your own property? And if you don't, would you? Our number is 877-301-8970 to call or to text. How do you feel about this?
You left something out.
What did I leave out?
I want to hear some Airbnb horror stories.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? We got to hear those from both sides. The people that have done Airbnb, the people that have stayed in Airbnb. There's got to be a lot of those where you get there and it didn't look quite like you thought it was going to look in those pictures. Although they do give pretty extensive pictures of where you're going when you're looking online. But you can be fooled, Jim.
Would you let anybody stay in your house?
I do. I used to do Airbnb.
Well, on the Cape.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a different thing. Okay.
Yeah. In my house?
Would you let someone stay in your house?
Because if you do an Airbnb, at least what you're supposed to do is that you're supposed to get all your stuff out of there. All your clothes,
or you
all
stick it
your
in a closet and lock the closet.
Yeah, but that...
And then the people who are renting the place try to break into the closet.
But I don't think you can practically do it in your own house very well because of all your stuff. I mean, you can't be moving all your stuff in and out and in and out and in and out. But so... Yeah, it's a good way to make money. It's definitely a good way to make money if you can't quite swing. See, what's happened on the Cape is I think so many people went and bought second houses during the pandemic when they were in the height of fear about the pandemic. They wanted to kind of get out of Dodge. So now they bought these houses, and they can't really afford to keep them up and have their other house that they live in.
That's fine in a vacation spot, but in real neighborhoods, like residential neighborhoods, we have a few on our street where I live in Emmons Square.
Really?
You don't feel like they're your neighbor because they're not your neighbors. They're just renting out damn space.
You don't know who your neighbors are that have been there for 50
I don't.
years.
I don't. I actually do not know who they are.
I think a lot of us don't know
but
who
for
our
other
neighbors
people, that's a problem.
Now, well, I think what's happening in places like Nantucket is they have these people that are renting, these really la-di-da houses, and they're there like for a week, and they're partying and carrying on. They got 7 cars in the driveway, and they're up until 2 o'clock in the morning, and people are being driven bananas.
I don't care about Nantucket. I mean, Nantucket was just a news hook because they're deciding today. That's primarily a vacation thing. Well, I have some sympathy for the workers who obviously it's more expensive to find space, or even the year-round residents. I'm talking mostly in communities like ours and that sort of thing. And by the way, do you ever stay in an Airbnb?
I found great deals on Airbnbs in New York City when 2 of my 3 kids
were living there?
Yes, because New York City hotels are like $500 a night. They're so expensive. So
do you steal people's stuff?
I do not steal people's stuff.
You never stole anything from anybody?
I never stole anything from anybody. No, I never did that. But some of them have been kind of dodgy. You get into some... one of my kids lived in kind of a formerly tough section of Brooklyn. You get some of these Airbnbs there. You're a little nervous going into the Airbnb, you know what I mean? But they're so much cheaper. That's why I think people do it. And you can rent them in all over the country. I know tons of people that have gone away on vacation. My kids have gone away on vacations and stayed in Airbnbs, and it saves them a lot of money.
Don't you have Airbnb? Well, it's not so true anymore, by the way. I mean, so the low-end ones are affordable, but they're not always so affordable. Are you not? You're not troubled at all about the neighborhood thing, where again, your neighbors and they're not there because they're renting out their damn place almost all the time, or it's an absentee owner who's renting out his or her place and that sort of thing.
I don't think we allow them in Brookline, Jim.
Do they not allow them in Brookline? There's some rules in Cambridge. I don't even know what the rules are. They passed something there.
I have no idea.
877-301-8970. We want to know about your summer plans. Do they involve Airbnbs? Marjorie really wants to hear Airbnb tragedies. You know who's written great ones? Can you pull up? Sean Murphy did a great thing. He's the fine print guy, does the consumer thing. I just remembered. He did one about one of the worst nightmares like ever kind of thing. And then it's hard to get the money back and whatever kind
I'll
of
tell
thing.
you what it is. If you do Airbnb, it's a lot of work.
What do you mean? Oh, you mean if you're doing Airbnb?
Oh, my God, yeah.
I thought you had your kid do it for you.
Oh, well, she resigned after a year.
Your kid resigned?
Yeah, it was too much work. It was too much work. You can get companies to do it for you, but if you try to do it yourself, which is the way to make the most money, you are talking a lot of work. You're talking sheets and laundry and cleaning, making sure everything's clean.
No, you'd be really good at
and
that,
watering
I
the
think.
plants,
Yeah.
and it is a lot of work, but you can make some money
Any stuff disappear from your... I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with this thing. No one took anything from your place?
You get calls like at 9 o'clock at night saying, I can't find the wine bottle opener, that kind of stuff, and some little stupid thing that you think.
You know what you do? You hang up on them. They paid you already?
Well, here's the thing.
What?
You get rated. You want to be
that's
rated.
a very good point.
I would like to say that in my brief experience,
you were a 5-star?
I was an A+.
Were you really?
Absolutely, because you have to
well,
keep
you're such a sucker,
really
though. You probably lost
clean.
money. Did you lose money?
No, I made money, but you have to keep everything very, very clean.
Your daughter quit representing you. What does that say about your Airbnb?
First, I had to give her a 5% cut. Then it was a 10% cut. Before I got up to a 20% cut.
And then she resigned. That really is a mark of managing excellence,
a good
Marjorie.
boss. Yeah.
877-301-8970. Let's take a call or two.
Here's a texter who says, staying at those just made me feel skeeved out. I'd be so uncomfortable staying in someone's house. What are their hygiene, cleanliness standards? What if there are hidden cameras? What if there are ghosts? Apparently now there's a deal with Airbnb. You cannot have indoor security cameras for good reason.
That's worldwide. They just
you can only have them in common areas. Okay, let's go to Elaine and Brighton.
That's probably why a lot of people were renting their damn houses out. I never thought about that before.
So they could
really? Exactly.
They could watch the renters.
It's gross. Elaine and Brighton, hi.
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 I've done Airbnb as a guest 3 times.
Yeah.
Once in Western Mass and twice at 2 different places in Florida. My experiences were excellent in both places.
There you go. There you go.
And one was like 350 square feet, and I thought, well, that's ridiculous. And then I realized, well, how much time are you in the place anyway? And you're just there to sleep, and it was a perfect solution. It was an adequate amount of space. But the best one of all was in Tampa, Florida, where I'm going back to my 3rd year this year, not in the summer. And a gigantic house with 6 guest rooms.
Whoa!
And there was a housekeeper on the premises.
Beautiful.
A gigantic kitchen that I could use whenever I wanted. I cooked 8 meals for the guys who owned it. It was just absolutely terrific.
So how much did it cost, Elaine? How much?
Who cares?
Well, that's it.
Oh, wow.
I Googled Airbnb with a pool under $100 a night. And I found this absolutely fantastic place.
Oh, come on. Elaine, it was a dump. For under $100 a night with 6 guest rooms?
It was absolutely gorgeous. I know it's unbelievable, but it's absolutely true.
Well, it's Tampa.
True.
Well, congratulations. You did great then, Elaine. Thanks for the call. No.
I don't want to go to Tampa.
I don't want to go to Florida.
Deirdre from Jamaica Plain said she just made a reservation last night. The cleaning fee was $310.
Yeah, that's a real problem.
That's a lot. My cleaning fee was only $100.
And the point one of our coworkers made, you know what the hotel cleaning fee is? 0, except the tip for the person who's cleaning your room, you know?
Yeah, but I know down the Cape, a lot of times the Airbnbs are cheaper than the hotels. 877-301.
How do you know? You've never stayed in a hotel on the Cape in your life.
Jim, when I was a businesswoman running my Airbnb business.
Can you imagine, people who know Marjorie, even if only through the radio, can you imagine Marjorie running a small business?
Yeah.
Wait a second. You were starting today? I thought it was next Thursday.
No. That's why I had somebody organizing it.
Well, she quit on you.
She did. She quit on me. She left me high
How many
and dry.
people have had their child in their business quit on them. If you have, give us a buzz, 877-301-8970.
No notice. That was it.
What did she say to you? I'm done?
That's it. I'm done. Candace from Cambridge, thank you for
calling. That is
calling.
rather embarrassing. Let me just tell you.
I'm exaggerating.
I don't think you are, actually.
She did a great job.
What's
Candace
her phone number?
Candace from Cambridge.
Hey, Candace from Cambridge.
Hi. So I am an Airbnb owner.
Oh.
And yes. And I own a little Airbnb inside my house because Cambridge requires only 2 ways for Airbnbs to exist in Cambridge.
What is it?
One is owner-occupied, which is me,
yeah,
and owner lives adjacent. So the rules are pretty succinct. Everybody understands them. I've been running it for 5 years.
Really?
I opened it, yes, 5 years. I opened it primarily for 2 reasons. One is to be able to pay for all the things that go wrong with my house over time, because we all know how expensive that can get to travel. But also, because I'm a solo female traveler often, and I've stayed in Airbnbs by myself, I wanted to create a safe place for solo female travelers.
Good for you.
Wow, there you go.
But do they, Candace, I'm not clear. They stay in your apartment, just in a room with you, essentially?
They have a room and a bathroom, a private bathroom. And I have people from all over the world stay with me.
That's great.
Some people come back multiple times. Most of them are academicians or coming here for graduation events, those kinds of things.
That sounds great.
So I can close it when I want to, open it when I want to. I'm a retired educator, high school biology teacher. It's worked out very well for
What
me.
neighborhood? Obviously we don't want your address. What neighborhood do you live in, Candace?
Well, I really prefer not to give that.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's
One last thing.
Let's put it that way.
Okay, so Candace, since you have expertise in the Airbnb thing for 5 years, what do you think of Marjorie's daughter quitting with no notice? Exactly. Nervous laughter. Candace, thanks.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
That's no
It is a lot of
excuse.
work. She didn't quit with no
It's her
notice.
family. Yes, she did.
Yeah, no, she didn't.
You know, every time Marjorie says something on air she didn't mean to, she tries to walk it back.
Quit with no notice.
She obviously quit with no notice.
Yeah, she did quit. But
Call his daughter.
You know
call
what
her
really
daughter.
gets to be a problem, too?
Jamie, call her kid.
If you do down
and
the
find out
Cape-
if she quit with no notice.
The laundry,
Really?
the
What?
laundry, the laundry. You know, you
Too much?
can't leave too many beach towels because they'll go through every single solitary
So
beach
what do you
towel.
do?
Well, you just don't leave too many beach towels because
Oh.
before you know it, you got 15 beach towels to wash at the end of the
that's
weekend.
amazing. That's
and you spend
horrible.
your whole weekend in the laundromat
Yeah.
if you're worried about the septic system, which everybody is on the Cape because they don't have sewage.
That's horrible.
Let's go to Jonathan.
Sounds
from
like it was really fun for you,
It was
actually.
a lot of work. I was exhausted, Jim. Exhausted. Jonathan from
By the way, before she did this, she told me how excited she was. We're talking, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, how excited I'm going to make money on the side.
Yeah.
It's sort of like free money kind of thing. Well, it didn't quite turn out that way.
Yeah, it did not turn out that way. That is true. Jonathan from Arlington, thank you for calling.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, thank you guys for having me on. Greatly appreciate it.
Sure.
So I was calling. I had 2 things. So I use Airbnb a lot, and my first thing was I've rented a house in Maine on a lake multiple times, and it's an interesting story. I kind of became friends with the owner, and he started renting the house off Airbnb. So I don't know if a lot of people do that, but he was super nice, and it's much cheaper because I guess he loses a lot of money with Airbnb's fees.
Yeah.
So he would do if I came on not busy weekends, he would rent it to me off Airbnb.
Nice.
So that was kind of like a nice trick.
By the way, before you go ahead, I'm sure that violates the contract. I mean, it's fine with me, but don't you think it violates the contract with Airbnb?
It might be, but I think his little lake house, maybe, I mean, it didn't get that much volume, so he didn't really care.
I got
But yeah,
it, okay.
it definitely could. I could definitely see that.
Okay, whatever.
But my other thing, I was staying in Vermont one time at an Airbnb in Burlington, and it was a nightmare. I got up there, and there was no key in the lockbox, so I was basically stuck, stranded for a night, just because. Oh, yeah, it was horrible. There was a car show going on in Burlington, so every hotel was sold out. And so I was screwed, and the owner was no help. He lived out of state, so it's like, yeah, I can't really do anything. I was able to get a refund, but luckily I was able to find somewhere to stay, but I thought I would have to drive home 5 hours back out of Burlington.
That was a demonic laugh there, Jonathan.
Wait a minute. So what did you do for that night? Did you sleep in the
He
car?
found a place, he said.
Oh, you did find a place,
No,
okay.
I called a friend of a friend, and luckily he goes to UVM, so he had a house off campus, and I was able to stay with him. But it was literally like a last-ditch thing. I knew someone who knew someone, but and I literally thought I was so upset, spent all this money on Airbnb, and the owner was really just no help. He's like, I can't do anything tonight. I'm like, what do you mean? You left no key in the lock.
So what rating did you give the owner, Jonathan?
I gave him a 5-star still, just because I personally felt bad about leaving.
I knew you would. I knew you would.
Yeah.
I could tell from your voice. You sound like a really good guy. Hey, Jonathan, thank you for the call.
Thank you.
An anonymous texter says even Eric Trump didn't quit the family business.
That's right.
That is true. Marjorie's kid, but not Eric Trump. 877-301-8097. You know, he raised an interesting point. Aren't you always nervous when you rent an Airbnb that the lockbox, they're going to forget to put the key in the lockbox, and then you're really in trouble?
Yes, yeah. You
that's
got to check.
terrifying.
Well, that's part of the work. You have to check and make sure the key's actually.
Well, how do you
in the
know the
lockbox.
key's going to be there until you get there?
And you have to also leave a key in a second place, and if there's some accident, you have to leave it inside the garage.
You did that?
Absolutely. You have
Wow.
to plan ahead, Jim.
That's
And I was
incredible.
only renting this little in-law
I
apartment
know, yeah.
underneath.
Like an ADU, like a granny flat.
Like a granny flat. That's where I'm going to be spending
We know
my
that.
golden years. in a
If
granny flat
Maura
there.
Healey is successful on her
Listen to
quest,
this.
what's that?
My neighbor 2 doors away rents through Airbnb. A group of state police rented it, and it was a week of hell. Even the local police couldn't do anything. 24-hour loud party like I've never seen. And I'm a city guy who's been to my share. That's from JP in Duxbury.
You know, that texter...
Now, what do you do if the state cops rent the place? I guess you
let them do whatever they want. You know, what was I going to say? Oh, that texter, the cleaning fee thing. Doesn't that drive you nuts?
Yeah.
It's always insane, the amount of money that they charge to clean the damn place, you know? And if it turns out you violate whatever the conditions are and you leave it messy, that's a whole other deal. But for normal circumstances, it's a ripoff.
Well, that's one of the things. If people do Airbnb a lot, they don't want you to say bad things about them.
Obviously.
And if they leave the place a mess, then you have to mark it on the, you give them a bad report, Jim.
By the way, if you say bad things about some of the people who rent the Airbnb, like those cops, they take it really well, by the way. So
Listen to this.
just be aware.
Airbnb nightmare. Booked an apartment in New York City for 2 nights with my family of 4 with kids on the couches, bed linens provided. Arrived to find only linens for 1 bed. Sheets were smelly, not fresh, or rat trap openly placed on top of refrigerator.
That's not true.
That's what they say. Contacted the owner, insisted we look for linens in the bedroom closet, which was literally stuffed with trash bags of dirty linens, told to deal with it.
Yeah, that's a
Airbnb
fear.
support was useless. We left after the first night.
Don't you love, by the way, we've discussed this.
On our way out, we found a little glass vial with white powder.
That's nice.
Somebody else said they had,
got that from the White House, actually.
I guess so.
What?
If you I should tell people this. If you text for too long, I can't read it. I can only get through like 6 lines. Don't go beyond 6 lines. But somebody else said that they had girls doing drugs in the bathroom.
Really?
Yeah. Or no, it was the bedroom.
Whatever.
2 girls doing drugs in the
Yeah.
bedroom. They did not like that one
Don't
bit.
you? I mean, by the way, as I said, I started to say, I would discuss this with Christopher Muther, some of the travel writer for the Globe. Don't you? Understand the expense thing. Don't you love staying in a hotel where everything? I mean,
Yes,
a nice
I do.
hotel where everything is clean
I do.
and sharp, and
I
they
do.
make the bed,
Right.
And it's like all.
But you go to New York City, where I went a lot
It's really
with my kids.
expensive, I
It's
know.
very,
It's very
expensive. And then that's before you even get like a glass of water.
Huh?
Lou in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Lou.
Hey, how's it going?
Excellent.
Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I have a house up in Peterborough that I rent a master bedroom out of, and I started doing this about 4 months ago, and I have to say it's working out really well. I try to keep the price lower than the local inns, and it seems to work out. Still trying to figure out the pricing of it, but I love meeting people. It's not that much work, and I do try to keep the bed nice and crisp, like a hotel.
So wait a second. So the same as that woman who called from Canada, you're happy having people you don't know stay in your space. You're good with that.
Yeah, I am. It took a little bit of getting used to, but it's a house that I don't fully live in. I'm
see.
there maybe about 60, 70% of the time. I work up in the area, but I also have a place in Somerville as well, too. So I'm back and forth between the two, but I don't mind. I've met people from China. I've met people who needed to get away from their family for the weekend. I've met people coming to ski.
Marjorie's daughter.
It's been interesting.
Hey, Lou, that's great. Would you be? Thank you so much. Would you be okay with that? Like those 2 callers having somebody stay in your house?
No.
In a bedroom? No, not
No.
me either. You want to meet people? No.
No, I don't. But a lot of people are saying
I
that
don't meet anybody.
they do that. They have
I know that.
doors with locks and a separate bathroom. One of the texters say the guy that founded Airbnb grew up in Roslindale and went to Boston Latin Academy. Nathan Blesher sick or something like that. We should check that out.
Wait, is this real or not real? By the way, allegedly, this is really from your kid, who says, and it sounds like it could be. Yeah, that's who her kid is. I didn't want to deal with guests.
I can't believe my daughter's listening.
The planning anymore. It was a lot. I think she's talking about her mother, especially in the summer. I can't believe your kid texted
Caroline,
the damn show.
Is this really you? I'm checking my phone. Identify yourself. Did you really just text the radio show? None of my children have ever listened to my radio show.
Well, apparently they do.
Even though they've lived in Boston for
maybe somebody told you that you were talking about
I don't know. Okay.
That sounded legit to me. Take a break.
That did. It was a lot,
We got to take a break.
Absolutely. Sorry. Anyway, we're talking about Airbnb.
How were you to deal with, in all seriousness, how were you to deal with, do you think?
I was mostly in a panic. mostly in a panic. You know what happens sometimes, too? We had this one time where people were staying there, and they heard mice in the ceiling.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and I had been so careful about the mice. It had I thought everything blocked off. So
that's very
and they heard
sad.
mice.
So what did you do about that?
Well, they called in the middle of the night. They're very upset about
So
the
what
mice.
did you do about that in the middle of the night?
You have to give them their money back and pay for their hotel.
Gave them all their money back?
Yeah, you got to pay. Well, you don't have to, but I did. Gave them their money back for the.
Wow.
I know that cost me a fortune. Anyway, the number's 877-301-8970.
Text your kid and see if that was really her.
I'm texting the kid.
Okay.
877-301-8970. Summer's coming. Are you going to Airbnb this summer? If you are an Airbnb customer, if you're an Airbnb renter, horror stories are very much accepted here and encouraged at 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, as society continues to skew toward virtual experiences, writer A.J. Jacobs likes to do things literally. He has tried to follow the Bible literally, hence his best-selling book, The Year of Living Biblically. Now his latest endeavor is to live the Constitution as literally as possible. He joins us to talk about his latest book, The Year of Living Constitutionally. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And National Grid, helping businesses work toward a sustainable future by offering guidance on heat pump solutions. Learn more about how heat pumps can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions at ngrid.com/future. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Andrew Lloyd Webber, Liz Cheney, historian Annette Gordon-Reed, and news anchor Chris Wallace. bostonspeakers.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Bradley. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will join us in person 1 to 2 this afternoon. Then we're back tomorrow. Tomorrow's Wednesday. We're back tomorrow. Friday, Doris Kearns Goodwin joins us to talk in general, talk about the current state of affairs. On the Cape, that her daughter, one of her daughters, was running it.
That's right.
And she resigned. And apparently, this is really her daughter texting us. We got the first text explaining allegedly why she left, and the latest.
Wait a minute.
What's she
telling me? I just said, "Did you really text?" And she said, "Not today." So maybe this isn't my daughter.
How do you know it's real?
Oh, whoops! This is the wrong person I'm texting. Never mind. Never mind. That wasn't my daughter.
This is not even. Marjorie just texted someone, not her daughter, to ask if she was texting the show.
Yep.
The person said, not today.
That was not my daughter.
But of course it was not her daughter.
That was Francine.
Okay, fine. So as far... God. I can't even. I mean... Okay, so what her daughter allegedly is also saying, we'll find out if it really is her daughter, the one, meaning the tenant, the Airbnb user, that called at 9 p.m. on a Saturday and said there was so much dust in the unit, her husband's eyes were swollen shut. Sounds like a great deal. Marjorie, that's one of the reasons Marjorie didn't charge up much.
That's right.
Is that a true story?
Yeah.
Well, obviously it is her then. Who else would know this?
I don't know. It was ridiculous, though. You know what's the other thing people complain about? Like I said, the wine open at 9 o'clock at night. Then, if you're down by a pond, you know what you have in the pond?
No,
you have spiders in the pond, and you have spiders on the pier in the pond.
Good.
They call them and complain about the spiders in the pier. What are you supposed to do about the spiders in the pier? They make webs every single solitary day. You know what I mean?
Why don't you text somebody else you don't know and ask them about the thing, the Airbnb? Oh, I didn't text you. Oh, it's not you. Okay. Josiah in Fitchburg, we are attempting to talk about Airbnbs. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Sorry, Josiah. It's Marjorie's fault. Go ahead. What's up?
That's all right. First time caller here. Thank you for taking the call.
Very kind.
And a frequent listener.
Thank you.
So I'm an Airbnb host here in Fitchburg now, and we've been doing this for about 10 years, and we just rent a spare room in our house, and it's been great. We get people from all over the world, like Lou said earlier, but I was going to say local guests tend to be the most troublesome between drugs, makeup, and just weird requests.
Well, give us a weird request. Yeah, what's a weird request?
Well, I mean, they want to check in early, leave late. Sometimes they're not sure what Airbnb is all about.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a lot of first-time travelers, and some are local, some are not so much. But
so wait a second, Josiah, let me understand this. I know you like meeting people from all over the world, like those prior two callers.
Yeah.
But when you say local, you mean somebody lives in Fitchburg and they decide for a wild weekend they're going to rent a room in your house in Fitchburg? Is that?
Well, I don't know. I think sometimes they don't expect that we live here.
Oh.
So it's been kind of a mixed bag. I mean, they just stay the one night, and I don't really ask too many questions.
Okay.
Josiah, you are great. Call us again. That was an excellent first call.
Listen
Thank
to this.
you
I got
so
a couple of good texts. I stayed in an Airbnb in New Hampshire when hiking. Right before bedtime, the plumbing stopped working, so all 8 of us had to do our business in the yard for the night.
Oh, my God.
Nothing like paying good money to crouch by a dumpster, hoping nobody sees you. If I'd wanted to go camping, I would have. That's Sarah from Waltham. And then Christopher from Plymouth says, Airbnb story near Amherst, down a dark road, greeted by 12-year-old, no adult present, settled into our room to be surprised at 2 a.m. by someone opening our bedroom door who said we were in their room.
Whoa.
How about that?
That 12-year-old is now doing life, I want you to know, in a facility in Western Mass. We have time for one more. Lisa, and we actually have time for Marjorie's daughter to text as much as she wants.
Listen to this. I stayed at a ramshackle Airbnb in upstate New York. The owner was there. He looked like Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He invited me for dinner, showed me his shrunken head collection.
Oh, God.
Later that night, I checked into a Comfort Inn. Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Okay, let's go to Lisa in Bellrica. What do you think, Lisa?
By the way, I just want you to know, excuse me, before you start, Lisa, if people saw Jamie, our lead producer, just walk away from his location and go into the control room, Zoe said it's because a mid-30s grown man is having a legitimate giggle fit. Look at him. Look at him. How pathetic is this? He's walking around the studio like a 4-year-old. It's really embarrassing, but it's okay. He's all we got. Lisa and Billerica, I'm sorry to interrupt your call there. What's up?
That's okay. Sounds like it was a good time.
It was a good time. Go ahead.
Early adopter of Airbnbs, loved them, mostly because you can get outdoor space. I specifically look for patios, yards, nice outdoor areas. I've done it from California. I went down all of Route 1 and spent every night in the Airbnb.
That is fabulous.
It was fabulous.
That's great.
I did have one horrible experience.
What was that, please?
So my husband and I rented a sailboat Airbnb up in Maine.
Yeah.
It was for a weekend with the meteor showers happening in August.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, she hasn't said it yet. What happened?
So they drive us out to the sailboat, and in the water, I'm like, what's up with the dead fish? And they're like, oh, those will go away. That's just, don't worry about it. They drop us off at the boat. The boat has a dock attached to it. We're sitting there, and there is literally thousands of dead fish.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Just pouring across us. I guess once in a while they have something called a pogey die-off
Sure.
in Maine, where thousands and thousands of fish die and just float.
So did you ask, let me be clear though, did you ask for a location with dead fish or you didn't?
I did not.
I just know I had to be clear.
Hour.
Okay.
I tried for an hour to sit there, and just the stench and the
That's nice. Sounds great.
with decayed parts.
Excellent.
So if
I'd do that again.
You got to
yeah.
come pick us up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lisa, do you know Marjorie's daughter or no? Do you?
Hell no.
You do not. Okay. Lisa, thank you for the
Here's
call.
Zoe in Rosendale. I rented a small studio in Paris at Airbnb. Arrived. The trash is full. Dishes all dirty. Sheets in the bed dirty. Smelled bad. The ones in the closet even dirtier. The bathroom reeked of urine. The moment we opened the door, and there was some strange crusty substance on the floor and on the curtains in the bedroom.
So, do you want to know who owns the nicest Airbnbs in Paris? Do you know what his name is?
No.
Jim Browdy. Not me. He's a doctor in Atlanta, and I met him because he got my email one day when I was in Penn or whatever. And yeah, he and his partner, or his husband, I think, have these beautiful, which I could not afford, by the way, beautiful, beautiful places in Paris. So check out Jim Browdy if you're going to Paris, spelled the same way, etc. Karen from Norfolk, before we end this, says, Marjorie's giggle about thinking she was texting her daughter is the best thing I've heard since Anderson Cooper. I'm dying laughing. If people have never seen Anderson Cooper go on a laughing fit where he cannot, it is really a sight to behold. Okay, Marjorie, we're done.
We're moving on.
Yeah. And by the way, if anybody wants to rent your Airbnb, who do they contact? Anybody?
Well, I'm not renting it this year.
Okay, I can understand why.
I'm too tired. And too much dust, I guess.
And Caroline, thanks for texting.
Yeah,
we
thank
appreciate
you, Caroline.
it. Excellent
NBC
text.
Sports Boston's Trenni Casey is next. She's going to talk about the Netflix. On Netflix, they had this roast of Tom Brady, and it got pretty raunchy. We're going to share with you some of the jokes. We're also going to talk about the Celtics and the Bruins and hockey. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
Kalush Orchestra is one of the most popular bands in Ukraine since winning the Eurovision Song Contest 2 years ago. The band raises money for Ukrainian troops and families.
During the war, it is important to raise the spirits of the people.
Musicians as cultural ambassadors, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and Davis Malm, knowing the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com. That's DAVISMALM.com. Davis Malm, lean, agile, strategic.
And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Gitt and Jim Browdy live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. The Mayor Wu, will join us 1 to 2 today. She'll be here in person to take your questions and ours. And if you're at the library, you can ask her a question from that mic over there. We are back tomorrow. On Friday, Doris Kearns Goodwin joins us to talk in general about the state of the world, the Red Sox, and her fabulous new book. Before we go ahead, one of the ways that we knew that Marjorie had not texted her daughter is because the person Marjorie texted was one of her other daughter's best friends, who's a good friend of ours, Mother. And so her mother texted her to say whatever. So in any case, we got to the bottom.
Yeah, it was kind of a debacle all
It
the way
was a
around.
debacle. So if you just tune in, we're not talking about short-term rentals anymore. We're talking to Trenni Casey. Trenni is anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston. She's going to be doing the Olympics pretty soon, too, and a BPR contributor. Hello, Trenni Casey.
Hi, we can talk about short-term rentals.
Well, you're another short-term rental person?
I've done it before. It's hard sometimes if you go, we went hiking up in the White Mountains. So do you want to pay, listen, the Mount Washington Hotel is glorious, but do you want to pay $1,000 a night when you're just going to sleep there? I don't know if it's that much, but it's pretty expensive. Or do you want to pay like $400 a night to stay at somebody's house. Like,
well, can I tell you, I really don't care what your view is on Airbnb.
We have to clean the whole thing and mow the lawn before you leave.
Okay, but here's what I care about. You told us during the break here, we were talking about these IV drips that people are doing recreationally, and you apparently have done them regularly?
Well, not regularly yet, but I definitely, as soon as I did, when I looked up, I was in Wisconsin for my friend's divorce party. So we might have had a few too many cocktails on a Saturday. Why are you laughing, Marjorie?
She's coughing.
Oh, okay.
I was sneezing. I'm sorry.
God bless you.
So,
and so my friend Lisa gets them regularly. She gets them before she flies. She has a monthly subscription. She goes to the med spa that's not far from her house. You go and you sit in this IV chair and they give you like a fancy sparkling water and they got TVs up and you lean back in these chairs and they say, how do you feel? And I was like, well, I work out a lot and we drank too much last night. And she was like, okay, well, I think you should have this concoction and I think we should add this and we should add this. And I was like, great. And she's like, at one point it's going to feel in your mouth like you're tasting Flintstone vitamins. And it does, because whatever they give you tastes like Flintstone vitamins. Remember Flintstone vitamins?
Of course you do, yeah.
Of course you do. And then I felt like $1 million. I slept great. I had sometimes after I go out and I drink a lot, my recovery isn't great and I don't have good workouts for a couple days. Chef's kiss. Killed it that
Do you
week.
really? And do you feel different as soon as the IV drip is done? Do you feel different right away or no?
Yeah, you just feel better. Your headache goes away almost immediately. Like I had no headache, and I had to fly because I flew to Wisconsin on a Saturday morning. We went out all day Saturday, and then I left Sunday morning. So I had a very short window of a lot of flying and dehydration, and it was awesome.
Well, by the way, before we leave, Stephen Wright, the king local guy with the greatest one-liners of all time, one of his one-liners just reminded me was, the Stones, they just keep doing it. Fred and Barney and whatever. I know it was not good. It wasn't my joke, so don't look at me that way. In any case, we're talking to Trenni Casey.
So Netflix did this roast of Tom Brady, Gronkowski.
Did you guys watch?
I watched excerpts last night.
Just a couple of minutes of it. Kevin Hart, who was really a little bit raunchy. What do you say?
They were all a little bit raunchy.
They were all a bit raunchy. But
they rolled over the third rail and pushed each other onto it. It was unbelievable.
Okay. We have a little bit of sound.
We have a little bit of sound.
It's not, because everything is so raunchy, the sound is so-so. Yeah, go ahead.
But you'll hear Jeff Ross entering the roast. Now, who's Jeff Ross?
He was sort of like the host with Kevin Hart.
Okay. Well, he's also I don't do a lot of comedy and roasts, but apparently he's a master roaster.
Oh.
So this is sort of his specialty.
Okay.
All right. Well, you'll hear Jeff Ross entering the roast wearing an O.J. Simpson jersey. Then former NFL football player Drew Bledsoe, who, of course, was ousted from the Patriots by Tom Brady. And lastly, Kim Kardashian.
Oh, she's bad.
There we go.
Yeah, motherfuckers, it's a roast. And I had to dress like OJ because I'm about to kill this white right here.
So, real talk, a lot of people just assume that I have a lot of animosity toward Tom Brady. But I'm here to tell you tonight, in front of millions of people, that you're correct. I hate him.
Honestly, it's hard for me to watch people roast you, but I think enough of my family members have helped defend former football players.
If people don't know, is their father was one of OJ's lawyers?
Yes.
Yeah. By the way, for those who didn't watch this thing, those are about the least funny. There were moments that were riotously funny.
That's not even the funniest. That's to me one of the funniest Drew Bledsoe lines. So listen, I didn't know what to expect. Let's just start there. I thought Tom Brady, he's not going to let people, what kind of roast is he really going to allow? Listen, he opened it up, no holds barred. There was no topic off, including Aaron Hernandez, that was off the table. You have to understand comedy. If you watch it, you're like, oh, that's super inappropriate. That is not at all politically correct. But that's what comedy is. Comedy is supposed to take the worst of us and make it funny and make you feel uncomfortable, to remind you how bad it is to think that way, right? So, and it starts with this little sketch thing, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be terrible. It was like Belichick, Brady, and Bledsoe, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be awful. And that was the last time it was bad. It was, my husband and I were crying, laughing. It was so funny. And Drew Bledsoe at one point said, I have two things that Tom Brady will never have. I was a #1 overall draft pick, and I just celebrated my 28th wedding anniversary. Because obviously, they took shots at him for crypto. They took shots at him for his plastic surgery and Botox and everything that he gets. Every single thing that you could think of that you could make fun of. They took, his relationship with Alex Guerrero. Belichick was
Here's the
hysterical.
Alex Guerrero line, by the way. We don't have Belichick, who's the least funny human being on the planet, was a riot. Here's his line. You know, this is Belichick talking about Brady. He says, you know, people, and by the way, if people don't know who Alex Guerrero, he's the sort of the snake oil salesman that Brady fell in love with, and they have business and whatever. Okay. You know, people have said that Tom and I have butted heads a lot, Belichick said. In a way, that was true, but not really. It was hard to butt heads with Tom because his was so far up Alex Guerrero's boom. You know, obviously his you know
behind. We'll clean it up.
That is really pretty funny for Bill Belichick.
I mean, and Brady had a funny one. I'm sure you guys saw the video not long ago of the ring camera video of Bill Belichick like sneaking out of like a very young person's shirtless apartment to like move his car.
We don't know 100% it was him. It looks a lot like him, by the way.
Well, they said, they made a joke about it, and he laughs, and he seemed kind of proud, like, yep, I'm hooking up with a girl who like lives in Southie. And it was hysterical.
Girls.
It said, like, they had things about, like, Julian Edelman made a joke about how, one of Bill Belichick's things that he always used to say to his players were, I scout the guys down at bleeping Foxborough High, and even those kids at Foxborough High could play, you know, better than you. And Julian goes, I've been waiting so long for this. The only job you could get was at Foxborough High. I mean, Julian Edelman.
Actually pretty funny.
The only people who weren't great. Randy Moss was surprisingly not funny, and as just a regular person, like an interview, he's hysterical.
He was great in Dynasty.
He was great in the Dynasty, but this having to perform, I think, because what happened was, so they had joke writers write their bits. So Rob Gronkowski, Julian Edelman, Drew Bledsoe, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, Randy Moss. I think those are the six.
Randy Moss was a fabulous end receiver.
Yes, receiver for the Patriots, and then their undefeated season, and he didn't win a ring, even though they were undefeated. Until obviously the Giants Super Bowl. Peyton Manning was great. Peyton Manning was there. So what they did is they had joke writers write those bits for them, but then they had to execute. And like they were reading off a prompter. If you've never read off a prompter before, it's actually quite difficult because you have to balance that you're reading something, but also delivering it in a manner that seems like natural. Julian Edelman knocked it out of the park. He was by far, him and Drew Bledsoe were probably the best athletes. Peyton Manning was good. Brady was fine. He was a little stiff. They could have cut some things out. Like we didn't need Ben Affleck. He just was like angry about
why was
trolls.
He there?
Well, because he's a Boston guy and he's a big Brady fan. They did the Dunkin' commercial together. Kim Kardashian, like. That one line, like I don't know what's going on with her, but she didn't need to be there.
But there was one controversy. I don't know if it was faked or not. Jeff Ross made a joke about
massage parlor?
About the massage parlor, obviously with Kraft there. And what Brady then did, went to whisper in his ear, said no more of that SH you know what.
Yeah.
Now, no one knows if that was real or phony.
We think it was.
Why?
Because, and I didn't notice this, and this is credit to my producer, Jeff Capitasto, who like went through all the jokes and everything with a fine-tooth comb. Later, after Kraft spoke, and Kraft did speak, he had a little bit as well, Kevin Hart said to Kraft, don't worry, I've got you. We made a deal. No one else has touched you and they won't anymore. So it seems, at least on the surface, that Robert Kraft said, yeah, I'll show up, but I don't want to be the butt of any joke, which I'm kind of like, you know what? I mean,
then don't show up.
Then don't show up. Like Bill Belichick laughed at everything that came his way, and some of it was really inappropriate and funny. Rob Gronkowski, God bless his heart. He was called dumb every way you could call a guy dumb during the show. Like there was, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Nikki Glaser. Again, I don't do a lot of comedy.
I didn't until she was great.
She's a comic. She's a comic. She was so funny, and she had this line about how Brady got all mixed up in crypto and costing people's money, and he goes, she's like, even Gronk. Me, Gronk, I know that, not real money, and it was like everybody made fun of him and he laughed. I mean, sometimes you could actually see him trying to process. At one point they said, the forum, it's how Rob Gronkowski counts to 5.
Oh no.
And they pan to him, and I'm not joking, you guys.
That's
He was like 1, 2, 3. And then he got it. Like he didn't get it right away. That the 4 was the what comes next after 4. Of course, it's 5. And he kind of didn't get it right away. At one point, he was reading his bit, and Kevin Hart goes, "Sound it out, Gronk. You can do it." But he played to the part. It's in Kraft, and that was a weird moment. And then the only other really awkward moment was Kevin Hart tried to bring Belichick and Kraft up to do a shot together, and you could tell. I mean, Belichick had so much fun during this thing. I've never seen that guy smile more in my entire life. He wanted nothing to do with being up there with Kraft, because Kraft then, instead of just doing the shot and being done with it, he's got to go out of his way to look like I'm, the Mr. Good guy, and he's like, this is the greatest coach of all time, and yada, yada, yada. And Belichick made a joke about how he went through a roast already. It was a 10-part series on Apple TV.
Yeah.
That's pretty clever.
For Kraft to come up and then go out of his way to talk about, oh, you're the greatest of all time, we were so lucky. Like, you just fired the guy 3 months ago. Just shut up and take the shot.
And trashed him on that show.
And trashed him on the show. And they've gone out of their way down in Foxborough to make it known that everything they're doing is opposite of what Bill Belichick did. It just was like, stop trying to make everybody like you, Kraft. Like, you're 80-some years old. Just
So
hang out and be fine.
Jim told me, first of all, why did Netflix do this? Why was this even done? Was there some pretext?
My guess is that.
So
it was
like the biggest celebrity in the whole damn
So it
world.
was just
That's why
it
was live.
Well,
too,
it was live, which I've never watched anything live on Netflix
Nor
before.
have
It was, I think, the part of the reason they did it. It was 199 Productions, which is Tom Brady, chosen 199th in the NFL draft in the year 2000, which is his production company. So he did it. I'm sure he got paid a pretty penny. But I also think that, like, here's a guy who is trying to start this new career, and what better way to humanize yourself?
That's a great point.
And say, hey, look, you're going to want to watch me on Fox. I'm not going to be this robot everyone thinks that I am. Come watch me get roasted. Look at what a normal guy. But he kind of was just Brady. He was
he's stiff.
He's stiff.
So
he's no Peyton Manning on TV.
You informed me this morning that Giselle was in a huff.
Yeah, I read in People magazine this morning.
She was
very upset because jokes were made about the family. I mean, really, whatever.
Well, they weren't made about the family so much.
Well, about her, about her and
like
his
at one point, it might have been Kevin Hart was like, "Didn't you start to get? You didn't think it was weird that she was taking 9 jiu-jitsu lessons a day?"
I didn't hear that one. That's
like there were a
Does Brady laugh at that?
There was a lot of. He kind of softened as it went on. Like, you realize, like, wow, I guess I opened myself up to this. I have no choice. But he also was fawned over by everybody, how attractive he is and how great he is. And everybody came around at the end that you're the greatest of all time. And he sort of embraced that for the first time
ever. Have you ever done a roast?
I would not.
I did one roast.
Roasted?
No. I would believe me. I was on the roast panel for Ernie Bach Jr. to raise money for that great foundation he does. The instruments
music,
for the schools, whatever. Music drives us, I think it's called.
Yeah.
It was the raunchiest. And his mother was sitting next to him in the audience, and I am telling you,
Brady's sisters were there.
Were they real?
Brady's parents were there. I would be mortified.
So would I. Well, I was a roaster, so it's not happening. In any case, the reason we're talking about
this... We roast Jim every day in our work group chat.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, and Jim roasts Marjorie every day here on the show.
By the way, we've spent more time talking about this than the thing is, but it's because you can't play almost anything from the damn thing.
It's hard,
because the language is so foul. So just changing briefly, let's play a little sound. It's actually exciting. The Bruins won their first game in round 2 of the playoffs against the Florida Panthers. They crushed them last night, 5-1. Here's a little bit from ESPN.
On tour and deep. It's all the way back around. Verhage waiting for it again. Fires one towards the net. That was blocked. Stick broken for Marchand. Empty net. DeBrusque scores. Icing on the cake for the Boston Bruins.
The only reason I brought this up, because we generally don't talk about current whatever sports thing. One of the exciting things, even if you're not that into either of the teams, every night there's a playoff game now with Bruins and the Celtics. One and then the next and the next.
And not just Bruins and Celtics, but the women's hockey team, the PWHL Boston, they made the playoffs against Montreal. So they are also, their first games are going to be May 9th and May 11th. They have a series against Montreal. And I thought this was interesting. I was reading about how the PWHL, it's still a small league, right? But the top seed gets to choose.
How humiliating is that if they choose you?
Of the 2 bottom seeds, they choose which one they want to play. And Toronto chose Minnesota, so Boston will play Montreal. And then whichever team advances from there. So it's just a semifinal and a final. But we've got, there's a ton of all 3 of our pro sports that are in the postseason.
That's
the time right now. All 3 of them are in the postseason. a lot to cheer for. I was actually surprised the Bruins won.
Do you know what? Why you mean the seventh, the final game of the
final
last
game
round, yeah.
and yesterday? I mean, just they scored. I mean, listen, they really scored 4 goals and an empty netter. It's kind of a garbage goal, but they had 2 defensemen who scored. So if they can keep that up, they can beat Florida. I'm not sure that they can.
You know who I watched? What I watched the other night on my phone. Talk about embarrassing, because it was only on Caitlin Clark's first game.
Oh yeah.
In the pros, it was an exhibition game. 16 points in the first game as a pro, 16 points in the first half, lead scorer in the game, her first game. And, they made a really interesting point, the announcer, is, a lot of people thought she'd be overwhelmed by the pro game. The difference is she was in college with 4 pretty good players. She's now in the pro with 4 really good players.
Yeah.
And they're helping to set her. And she is just, she literally, I know it's been said before, she dribbles across half court. She has like one leg in the forecourt, and she drills a 3 from like 30 feet away.
Yeah.
It is really, really amazing. It was thrilling. Unfortunately, it was only online. I don't quite get it.
As long as
preseason games, honestly, sometimes even in the NBA, you might get a preseason game on like your local regional, because WNBA doesn't have, a lot of teams don't have regional deals. The Connecticut Sun do, they have a regional deal with us. But sometimes it'll just be like on NBA TV or something too. So that is a little bit more common. A lot of soccer games, football as they call it.
I've heard of that.
Speaking of women's basketball, how about women's hockey, the professional women's hockey team?
She just said.
Yeah.
In the playoffs.
Yeah, they're in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything more about them, or is that it?
Just said a whole bunch about them. Thanks for listening, Marjorie.
All right,
she was texting her daughter to see if her daughter could rent out the...
They're playing Montreal. They didn't get chosen by Toronto, so...
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes,
I thought you were talking about somebody else.
Okay.
Sorry. I read the text messages over here.
No, she does. She does an excellent job.
I read the text messages.
We only have a minute left.
It's like being at home with my husband. It's fine.
My favorite story at the week was that, even though the Kentucky Derby photo finish was pretty exciting, the B story for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Oh, my gosh.
Where their game was postponed for, what, 2 hours? Because why? Because there was a bee.
There was like a bee colony. Okay, so when you go to the ballpark now, they've got netting everywhere, but this netting was like the one that was like right behind home plate, and a colony of bees had swarmed and like grasped onto the netting and the line, and like just the netting, I guess, because it goes up and over now. And they had to evacuate, like both dugouts. They had to evacuate like all the seats behind home plate, and they had to call a guy from a pest control company who was at his son's t-ball game. He had to leave. Phoenix is a sprawling metropolis, so it took him like 45 minutes to get from like one town to downtown Phoenix, where Chase Field, I think it's still called Chase Field, where the D-backs play. And he had to like go in there, and then what did he do to them? He
sprayed them.
He didn't kill them. He calmed them down.
Exactly, and then you vacuum them up, but you don't kill them, and then you let them loose somewhere else.
Because bees are very important to the environment, so they don't want to just like poison them and kill them. So instead, yes, he like sedates them, gets them sedated, vacuums them in, and then goes. And then they brought him back in his beekeeper suit. This beekeeper suit, he threw out the first pitch.
How great! I love that part of the story.
It's such a great story.
That is a great story.
Yes.
I wonder how you get them back out. I assume they're still sedated, otherwise they might. I
suppose maybe they like when they're in the bag. There's like at least just enough oxygen or something. I'm sure. Who knows? I don't know. My dad actually has worked in pest control since I was a kid, so yeah, I could ask him.
So before Marjorie has mice in the roof of her unit or Airbnb unit, maybe she can talk. You can talk to her next time. Jamie,
I'll ask my dad. He'll help you.
Jamie said if you come a little early next time, right before you appear, you can do an IV drip. So it'll be great. So
I came so early today. Jamie's like, you're not on till 11:30, right? I was like, okay, I know. I usually get here right at the like buzzer.
Sort of like Marjorie.
Maybe we should try an IV drip, Jim.
We should. Maybe we should.
We should go for an IV party.
I don't think so. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Trenni Casey is an anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a Boston Public Radio contributor. Thank you, Trenni.
Take care, Trenni.
Up next, what is queer food? Our food policy analyst, Corby Kummer, is going to fill us in.
This is a coordinated monthly test of the broadcast stations of your area. Equipment that can quickly warn you during emergencies is being tested. If this had been an actual emergency, official messages would have followed the alert.
Are made possible thanks to you. And Mass General Cancer Center, dedicated to providing compassionate care and cancer specialists who are experienced in the cancer you have. When you hear the word cancer, their team is ready. Learn more at massgeneral.org/cancer.
On the next Nature, the most famous bear in Wyoming attempts to raise 4 cubs as she makes consequential choices to protect her family. Watch Grizzly 399, Queen of the Tetons, tomorrow at 8 on GBH2.
I'm Associate Digital Producer Elena Eberwine, and you and I are listening to 89.7.
Former President Donald Trump's back this hour at a New York courtroom where Stephanie Clifford, a.k.a. Stormy Daniels, has taken the stand. The prosecution alleges that during his 2016 presidential campaign, Trump directed employees to pay the adult film actor $130,000 to keep quiet about an extramarital affair she and Trump allegedly had years earlier. Daniels is providing details of an encounter that Trump denies he had. This is the first of 4 criminal trials against Trump, who remains the GOP's 2024 presumptive presidential nominee. Meanwhile, President Biden is speaking this hour about the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States. He's attending the Holocaust Remembrance Ceremony at the U.S. Capitol. This as colleges and universities across the U.S. grapple with protests over Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. Hamas and Israel have sent teams to Cairo today to try to revive talks toward a possible ceasefire in the war. Last night, Hamas said it accepted an Egyptian-Qatari proposal, but Israel said the terms did not meet its demands. NPR's Lauren Frere has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Celebrations erupted last night in Rafah, southern Gaza, as word spread of a possible ceasefire, but they were soon followed by airstrikes. Among the dozens killed were people who had heeded Israel's order to evacuate, but then turned back, assuming attacks would halt. They did not. Israeli tanks also moved in on the Gaza side of the border with Egypt. Israel calls its operation there limited and says it's going after remaining Hamas battalions, not civilians. Hamas, though, accused Israel of trying to undermine the truce talks by mounting this Rafah offensive. Lauren Frere, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Russia's held another presidential inaugural event. Vladimir Putin has begun a new 6-year term. Russian leader was inaugurated in a ceremony today at the Kremlin, extending his near quarter-century hold on power. Here's NPR's Charles Maines.
Constitutional reforms back in 2020 laid the legal groundwork for Putin to remain in office, and an election in March against no serious competition saw him claim a landslide victory.
Клянусь при осуществлении полномочий президента Российской Федерации.
In a swearing-in ceremony at the Kremlin's Grand Hall, Putin said the results showed the country was united behind the war effort in Ukraine. Putin also said he remained open to dialogue with Western governments, provided, he said, they stopped trying to contain Russia and sought a path to cooperation and peace. The U.S. and many of its Western allies boycotted the event, but have stopped short of requests by Russia's exiled opposition to refuse to recognize Putin as Russia's legitimate leader. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The future is shaky for Steward Healthcare's hospitals here in Massachusetts. The company filed for bankruptcy yesterday. And as Katie Lannon reports, Steward's hospitals remain open under the close watch of state officials.
The state's Department of Public Health has monitors on site at each Steward facility, taking stock of staff levels, supplies, and policies. Dr. Robbie Goldstein is head of the DPH.
It is safe to get care in Steward facilities. The facilities are open. You should not drive past it. If you're having chest pain, if you're a pregnant person about to deliver, please go to the hospital that's closest to you. Go to the hospital that's in your community.
State officials say they're focused on ensuring access to care and protecting the jobs of Steward workers. And they're setting up a call center for Steward patients in need of answers.
More than 400 Harvard students and Cambridge residents marched to the home of interim Harvard President Alan Garber last night. The pro-Palestine walking rally was organized by Harvard out of occupied Palestine after Garber refused to negotiate with protesters over their ongoing encampment in Harvard Yard. Meanwhile, at a press conference earlier in the day, the protesters did not say whether the encampment will continue even after Garber threatened protesters with involuntary leaves of absence if they do not pack up their tents. Tomorrow, Wednesday, marks 2 weeks since the Harvard encampment began. In sports, the Celtics open the second round of the playoffs with the Cleveland Cavs at the Garden tonight. Tip-off is at 7. Red Sox in Atlanta tonight for a game with the Braves. This is GBH News.
Comes from NPR stations.
Other contributors include Fidelity Investments. A dedicated wealth advisor can help create a wealth plan for a full financial picture. More at fidelity.com/wealth. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. This is NPR.
Mr. Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. The mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, is going to be here from 1 to 2 to take our questions and yours. And by the way, on Friday, I'm very excited about this as well. Doris Kearns Goodwin is going to be here to talk about her new book. It's about her love affair with her longtime husband, Dick Goodwin, and who was very involved in the JFK White House. It's a lot about the 60s, and it's a really great read. Hello, Jim.
You forgot me for a second.
I did.
Hi, Marjorie.
Hi.
We're joined now on Zoom by food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner, Corby Kummer. Corby is the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Good afternoon, Corby Kummer.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Marjorie.
Hello, Corby Kummer. So let's start with this story that made the New York Times about this BU first inaugural queer food conference at, as I said, BU, Boston University, last weekend. Is this about queer food or queer people eating the food, or what's this all about?
You know, it's kind of all of the above. It is not, if you order okra, that makes you gay. So this is not going to be like a litmus test of fitting with your order. But it was the whole idea of what I really like best about this event, which was held by BU. Megan Elias, who's just a terrific, innovative head of the Metropolitan College gastronomy program that was started by Julia Child and Jacques Pépin. I really don't know what Julia Child would say about queer food, although I can imagine. Jacques Pépin is very open. It's the idea of different communities coming together over food. So how is the queer community, which is a large encompassing term that embraces its outsider status. It's not so much related to gender preference or sexuality. It's a whole political identity. Many heterosexual students and young people will call themselves queer because they identify with the ideals, with the idea of empathy, with the idea of understanding what it's like to be an outsider. So this did have Oprah, one of the professors, a non-binary transgender lesbian, who will soon graduate from the food studies program at New York University, the first in a great program, saying Oprah is queer. So many definitions of what the idea of queer food was. But really what I thought was great, and there were pictures of the High Street Place, that fantastic downtown food hall that held this big event. The whole idea was bringing communities together.
Before you leave the okra discussion, it bears mentioning again, if you weren't watching, I don't mean you, but you too, if you were not listening or watching when we had two of the, I think 8 owners, whatever it is, of Comfort Kitchen, which is a finalist for the best new restaurant in America, the James Beard, when they were with us last week, we talked about okra. Did we talk about okra? And okra, I generally find to be a really slimy kind of thing, but they do something with okra that I've never experienced before, and it is really fabulous. Queer or non-queer, it is a fabulous iteration of okra. Do you like okra there, Corby Kummer, or no?
Of course I do, because I like weird food, including queer food. But have you never had it dusted with cornmeal and deep fried?
Oh, that sounds pretty good.
That actually does sound really good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not slimy that way. There are many ways to make it non-slimy. Other people, like in a gumbo, to make a thick, rich sauce, do want that slime.
Okay, Corby Kummer, first of all, tell us about what ultra-processed foods are and whether or not they're as bad for us as people think they are.
This could be a Blue Book exam question from now to the end of the decade. What is ultra-processed food? It really varies by the person defining it, but mostly it is, if it includes ingredients you would never cook with, you can't buy easily, and different processes that are very different from what's in a kitchen, that incredibly kind of common sense, is it in your kitchen? Do you find this on your supermarket shelf? What it is a stand-in for is nutritionally hollow foods that are simply engineered by salt content, by fat content, by sugar content to have that so-called bliss point that makes you keep going for more, but you can't eat just one. You keep eating it and eating it, and it's what another food studies guy calls mindless eating. You're not even noticing all of these calories you're ingesting. There's a war on it now. A Brazilian researcher in the mid-90s named Montero started to notice skyrocketing obesity rates in Brazil, and he began to see many fewer staples being sold in supermarkets like rice, like cooking oil, like beans, and a very increased purchase of soda, sausage, instant noodles, packaged breads, and cookies. So he began doing these observational studies to say what's happening in the years that these main staples have gone down, meaning less scratch cooking at home, more people buying packaged foods and making that their meals. And, lo and behold, it's associated with a rise in obesity. There's a lot of squirrely science about it because every nutrition person will say it's not good to rely on packaged food for your meals. The only real scientific study that's been done, at least in this country, was by Kevin Hall at the National Institutes of Health, one of their divisions, who locked people up for 2 weeks, actually 4 weeks. So for the first 2 weeks, they ate one diet that was made up of ultra-processed food, but it was stuff that was in packages and they unwrapped and had, salmon. It was TV dinners, essentially. But they had the same nutritional profile as the from-scratch cooking, with chickpeas not from cans, with, salmon that was grilled from scratch. And they gave people unlimited possibilities of snacks if they were still hungry. What they found was that the processed food group ate 500 more calories a day and gained, was it 2 pounds?
2 pounds.
At the end of 2 weeks. And then when they switched them over, because they switched all these groups to the diet they hadn't had for the next 2 weeks, didn't have that extra 500 calories a day of snacks. So there's many, many different theories. And Kevin Hall himself, a researcher, can come up with many. Not fiber with the food. They were giving people liquid soluble fiber on the processed food diet, but doesn't work fast enough. There are lots of different theories. He's got funding and he's doing another closed chamber study in which he hopes to have results. But right now, there are a lot of advocates who say in the next farm bill, there should be a recommendation, the new dietary guidelines, eat less ultra-processed food. It's a very contentious issue right now in nutrition circles.
I don't know if you mentioned this when you were talking to Marjorie there. In this New York Times story that we all read by Alice Callahan, it says that ultra-processed foods comprise 67% of the calories consumed by kids and teenagers in the U.S. And so you read that and you're horrified. And you talk about that one study that you and Marjorie were just talking about. But a headline in this piece by Alice Callahan is, why might UPFs on ultra-processed foods be harmful? And she seems to be saying that the jury is out. Still out?
Yeah.
I mean, is the jury still out?
Yeah, well, no, Marion Nessel, who's kind of my go-to guru about this, published a short paper that said they are the enemy and this is what is in need of regulation. So a lot of nutrition people have made up their mind, but there does need to be science that backs it up. That doesn't mean in the meantime you go on having your Twinkies and potato chips and corn chips to your heart's content. It does mean, and sodas and processed meats and all these things that are associated with rise in obesity, rise in hypertension, high blood pressure, high sodium. But we are still waiting for the actual scientific mechanism. It's like all of these studies. It took dozens of studies and years for tobacco to be proven to cause lung cancer. And in the meantime, there were the so-called merchants of doubt, the name of a documentary about the tobacco companies that tried to cast doubt on the causal link. So we're at that stage now with ultra-processed foods. It really looks like a very strong association with bad health indicators, rising obesity, especially in children, and rising hypertension, which leads to strokes and heart disease. But the actual scientific mechanism, for a while, it's out. That doesn't mean we don't change our diets for the better. We do change our diets for the better.
You know what surprised me? Some of the foods were on here. Margarine. Everybody used to say years ago you should have margarine instead of butter.
Trans fats, isn't it?
Well, it's an ultra-processed food on here, margarine.
Yeah, exactly.
And flavored yogurts and infant formula. I mean, wow.
And plant milk. Plant milk is on here.
And packaged breads. Can't we regulate at least infant formula so little babies and newborns aren't getting lousy food?
Formula, I don't know about. I think it might be added sugars in formula.
That's great. Add sugar to formula.
The added sugar is the problem in flavored yogurts, and one of the nutrition people quoted says, don't stop eating yogurt if the alternative is you're just going to give up the decent fermented food in yogurts. But as for plant milk, one of my students at Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition and Food Policy, her final project was about the fact that cow's milk has one extra processing step over plant milk, which we attack as being processed. Her point was the very fact of processing doesn't cancel out all of the possible nutritional benefits of milk. And this is certainly what industry wants you to know and wants you to believe. It's the food itself. It's not the processing step. But boy, is that controversial to come out and stick your neck out and say that. Look at the food itself and the nutrition on the package. Everyone will point to that closed study saying, okay, they did it, but people still ate 500 extra calories a day.
By the way, the flavored yogurt thing, which is upsetting to a lot of us, you get plain yogurt and you shove fruit in it on your own.
That is correct, Jim.
But you know what the flip side is? I have probably eating the healthiest I've ever eaten in my whole life, which is not perfectly healthy, but healthiest. And I read this damn list, and here are 4 things in a row, all of which I had on the same day this weekend. Chicken nuggets, hot dogs, sausages, and lunch meats. I'm like, I'm really embarrassed, but I did.
Jim is a big hot dog sausage kind of guy.
No, hot dogs. Well, you send me the sausage of the month.
I buy Jim's sausage of the month every year for Christmas.
Trying to kill me off there.
Sometimes it's salami of the month.
Yeah, it's even better.
Would you like to tell us about the chicken nuggets and how they entered your diet?
Well, because it was 2 packs for $4.99 at McDonald's. I drove by, I saw the sign, and I said to myself, who's going to pass this up? And my intention, there were 12 nuggets altogether, my intention was to have 2 nuggets. But it's sort of like you can't stop at 2, you know what I mean?
No, that's right.
So before what? You fell for it. The bliss point.
Exactly.
That's right.
My bliss point was 12, and that's in this particular instance, which I'm not proud. There's a really interesting story that you sort of touched on inadvertently when you talked about the cow being the processor or whatever it is. There is a fabulous story about a vegan blue cheese, otherwise known as no cheese in the vegan blue cheese, winning a cheese contest even when the tasters knew that it was a vegan cheese, and then the cheese sponsoring people got their undies in a bundle, so to speak, and cooked the rules so they could disqualify. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
So they could disqualify.
And the cheese was made of pumpkin seeds, lima beans, hemp seeds, coconut fat.
And you know what they said, by the way?
Butter.
The reason I thought of this, because what Corby said, the person who made, or the company, the guy, the person who makes the vegan cheese, blue cheese, said all we do is we skip the processor. The processor is the cow. So tell us what you think of this story.
Well, first of all, what makes you think that my touching on the story was inadvertent?
It was brilliant, actually. It was brilliant, Corby. You're right. Jim. I'm sorry. It was
what we're talking about are the Good Food Awards.
Yes.
And I have to admit, it's my friend Sarah Weiner who devised this, invented these awards out of nothing, raised all of the money, and now they are James Beard Award of kind of natural products. Natural is the most undefined word, but it matters how the companies treat their employees. It matters the sustainability of the ingredients they make and the processes they make. The big undie in a bundle controversy this year was that the maker of this cheese, which I think has the name of Climax
Blue.
Climax Blue was notified in January that he was the winner in a category that included cow's milk blue cheeses. And then an informant, perhaps a disaffected former employee of that company, was saying that one of the milks were fat and mouthfeel that was used in it hadn't been declared generally recognized as safe grass by the FDA. And that was one of the criteria for the Good Food Awards is food safety. They hadn't talked about grass specifically, and so they quietly withdrew it from the eligible candidates long before they were to announce, which was just now. But they couldn't get a hold of the head of the company because their contact at that company had left the company. Draw your own conclusions about whether that person was...
I have drawn my own conclusions.
We don't know. But in any case, the head of the company was incensed because this would be a big moment for vegan cheese to be found to be better tasting and more pleasing to the palate of jaded, experienced cheese lovers than the cow's milk cheeses. But in any case, that's not happening this year. The comparison is the so-called Judgment of Paris when a California wine won against the biggest French wines in the world.
That was like the biggest moment ever, like in the 1970s or something. Wasn't that like a huge?
It was for the bicentennial, and it was just this huge propaganda win that really launched California wines onto their trajectory to being a world power in wine. So I think the vegan cheese movement deserves a win. I think it should have it. But then there are very good quotations from one of the owners of the family-run Jasper Hill in Vermont.
Love Jasper Hill. Love it.
We all love Jasper Hill.
Yeah, it's great.
Formaggio Kitchen was the first big proponent of it here, but now it's very widely marketed. Who was saying, you know, we have families behind this. We don't have machines that are making this. This is completely natural. And so how this is just in the middle of playing out, this argument. It's going to come up again. For this year, it was kind of a blue eye. Let's not say black eye because it's blue cheese.
Thank you.
In the Good Food Awards, which are otherwise a great awards program.
That blue eye thing was intentional, too. I picked that up right away. Corby Kummer, it's wonderful to see you, as always. Thank you much
Corby.
for your time.
Corby Kummer is Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Up next, the Boston Foundation's President Lee Pelton. Lee used to be the president of Emerson College. We're going to talk to him about how colleges have handled these various protests at Emerson, Harvard, MIT, and elsewhere around the country. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Join GBH at our studios in Brighton for this month's live storytelling event, Stories from the Stage, Pride. On Thursday, May 9th, our storytellers will share their experiences standing up in the ongoing fight for equity and living their true lives loud and proud. Be part of our studio audience and enjoy a night of inspiring stories told over drinks with friends. Learn more and reserve your tickets now at gbh.org/events.
Support for our programs comes from you and the Museum of Science. As part of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, select Omni films are available to all on Saturday, May 18th, thanks to MathWorks. More information at mos.org. And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion, with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will join us in person at 1 o'clock. She'll be here for an hour. That microphone right over there, if you're in the newsfeed studio right here, you can speak to her directly, face to face. And on Friday, we have Doris Kearns Goodwin here about her new book and about the state of the world, and we're really excited about that. We're joined now by Lee Pelton. Lee is the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation, a member of GBH's Board of Trustees, but most relevant to today's conversation, previously served as the 12th president of Emerson College. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a sad occurrence, by the way. Last year, on Boston Magazine's list of the most influential people in Boston, Lee was number 3. He suffered a precipitous decline this year. It was rather embarrassing for him. I know him fairly well. He dropped all the way to number 6 most influential person in Boston. Lee, I'm really sorry, but we're really glad to have you here.
Thank you. Hey, listen, it was a really tough day.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a tough day for the person that looks every year rather obsessively at the list, only to find he's not on
Didn't
there.
make it, yeah. Who might that be?
Yeah. Might be you, Jim.
Doesn't bother me at all.
But we're very impressed. We're very impressed,
Good
Lee,
to see you, Lee.
that you're
Good
on
to
there.
see you.
So, you know, it is not a good time to be a college president these days. Jay Bernhardt that succeeded you at Emerson, he's only been there a very short time. The woman that's at Columbia, who's taking grief from all sides, just got there too. But let's talk about this. How are these presidents doing, and how are you supposed to handle a protest that, you, at least in many cases, comes out of people's concern about what's going on in Gaza?
Yeah. Well, you can't imagine, maybe you can't imagine, how many people over the last 2 weeks have said to me, aren't you glad that you're not a college president?
Yeah.
And I've surprised them by saying the answer is no.
Really?
Yes. I would very much like to be in this fray right now, because I think I have something to add and a perspective I think that would be useful. Now, having said that, each college and university is different. And so the circumstances around the encampments are different. And the issues are probably more tender and fierce than they might have been in the past. But we've been here before, obviously, during 1968. And students set up encampments in Harvard Yard. And they stayed there. And in fact, they set up a camp, you know, not an encampment, but they sat in Derek Bach's office.
That's right.
And he let them...
He was the former president of Harvard, for those who don't know, yeah.
And he let them stay. And he went somewhere, he left University Hall and stayed somewhere else. And in the late 80s, of course, you'll remember the encampments they're called shanty towns, asking the U.S. to divest in South Africa. And those shanties stayed up for a long time. I remember before I came to Dartmouth, there was one there had been for quite a while, and then there were a group of students who were opposed to it and came in and destroyed that shanty town. So we've been here before, but I think that the opposition and the opposing points of view and the complexity of what we're facing now is different and makes it much more tense.
So you started this, Lee Pelton, by saying you don't wish that, to use a double negative, that you're not still a university president. You thought you could have brought a valuable perspective to it. What would that perspective have been in 2024?
Well, I can only speak as a president of a small liberal arts college. I've been president for 23 years, but not at a large R1. So imagine that you are presiding over a campus where your major employees have lifetime contracts, and you don't. And they're particularly wedded to their discipline, perhaps more so than to the institution. So it's not like you can tell those faculty what to do. You have to develop a sense of trust. They have to trust you, and vice versa, and the same things with students. And so those of us who have worked in liberal arts colleges know that we have to work overtime and be really engaged in student life, be really engaged in faculty life, because
pre-crisis.
That's the point I'm trying. Because when this stuff happens, they need to trust you, and you need to have a relationship, and you need to have the capacity and the willingness to speak to one another. And if you don't have that, then this becomes a particularly difficult issue for one.
Well, I know you don't want to speak about individual presidents, I understand that. But I have to say, one factor you didn't mention, which is troubling to me, and maybe it's a variation on making sure you have a relationship. I am stunned how the lack of a presence that virtually every college president has been through this whole situation. I'm not going to ask you to comment on this. I'm just speaking for myself. Alan Garber, the interim president at Harvard, who we've heard not a peep out of since he took over, puts out a statement yesterday to the encampment. Other people have said nothing, and in my opinion, just cowering in fear somewhere that Virginia Fox, the chair of the Education Committee, or Elise Stefanik in Congress, or Bill Ackman, a donor at Harvard, or Robert Kraft is going to call you on the phone and say your money's being withdrawn. Are you not troubled by the fact that we have not seen a face, we have not heard a comment, we have not, I mean, they've been, and at least in my opinion, maybe I'm missing something, you'll tell me if I'm wrong, they've been virtual no-shows during this thing.
Right, yeah. I won't speak to that, but I will say, and by the way, I admire Derek Bach, because when I was there, you know, he knew me by my first name. He'd say, you know, I was just a student, graduate student there, so. But
were you part of sitting in his office?
No.
Okay. Okay.
But I was long after that.
Okay. Of course you were. That's right. Okay. Sorry.
I'd be 85 years old.
You were number 9 on the list then, I think. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Lee Pelton.
Number 9 on the list.
But he showed up. He showed up with the students.
That's my point.
He showed up with the students, and you have to. I think that, and again, I'm not pointing fingers here. I think the president of Brown has shown up, and you know,
a deal was cut with the students there.
Yeah, and really speaking to the students and said, "Oh, hey, we're going to let you talk to 5 of our members of our corporation, and why not?
And we'll vote on some of these divestment issues.
Yeah, right.
We, the board, and the leadership.
Yeah, show up. You have to show up. Even at a large university, you have to show up and be present with the students. I mean, you know." So you got to come out of your ivy tower. I really believe that.
So I've been asking this since this all began. If you are genuinely upset about what's going on in Gaza, and college kids do get very upset about these different things, you talk about apartheid, Vietnam War, obviously back, there was even a lot of college kids that occupied Boston that lasted 72 days, by the way, down in Dewey Square before the cops came in and took them out. Those were protests all around the country. Well, how are you supposed to do it? You can't really control the so-called outside agitators that might come in. That's very difficult. But, you know, some of these kids are facing suspension. They may not be able to graduate. And, you know, if they're not violent and they're peaceful, some of this seems like an overreaction to me.
Well, again, I don't know the particular makeup of, you know, particular encampments on particular colleges and universities. But if my view is if you assume that all of those encamping are students, or the vast majority of them are doing that, you don't call in the police.
Yeah.
I think you use your own security, you know, operation, because, and this is a knock on police, but police are trained to use force to stop something from happening. That is their training. And when we really need it, they do it very well. But it causes, as you can see, a lot of disruption, hurt feelings, apologies from university presidents who said, well, maybe we shouldn't have done that, and so on. You know, for me, the larger issue is this, not a larger issue, but a large issue is the incapacity, and this is outside of colleges and universities too, for us to talk across differences.
Right.
That has disappeared from our American society. And so, and why is that? So I think that, you know, colleges and universities will bring in, you know, person A to talk about this topic, and then a week later, person B to talk about that topic. What we should be doing is putting A and B in the same room at the same time, so that our students can really witness and appreciate what it means to have a civil discussion around differences, even if those differences are heightened. And I think that's a void.
Didn't they do that at Dartmouth? They
did.
Yeah.
They did. Worked for a little while, apparently, but not forever. But I'm just saying, as a general principle, that's something we ought to do. And then I'm going to mention this. This is not new with me. If you went to, let's say, an elite university or college 20 years ago, you were admitted, and then over the summer you would get your room assignment. You would get a room assignment. And the freshman dean's office would seek to put you in a room with people different than yourselves.
Yes.
Do you remember those days?
Yes, I do.
Today, and this has happened over the last 10, maybe even longer than years, students now can say, by the way, doing that was very difficult because there would sometimes be tension in those rooms, which could be not so good, but probably could be a good sort of test for how to talk across differences.
Or learning experience.
And learning experience. But today what happens is if you, when you're admitted to college, University A, you're invited to list all the preferences for your roommates. So you end up in a room with people who are very much like yourselves and who have, similar views of the world. And I think, this may be, again, this is not original to me, but I think that we ought to create an environment where students in the classroom, outside the classroom, in their residence halls, can learn and practice this hard thing of talking across differences.
By the way, we were talking about the value of a college education the other day when we were at UMass Boston. One of the reasons beyond the economic consideration was exactly what Lee Pelton's talking about, the opportunity to meet and relate to people who are not like you, who you didn't spend your first 17 years hanging out with. So it's very frustrating that you don't want to talk about individual presidents, even though I wouldn't if I were you. Tell us, explain, when you talked before about having pre-existing, pre-crisis relationships, give us a couple of examples of what you did when you were running Emerson to get to that point where you had a relationship of trust at difficult times. What did that mean? How'd that manifest itself?
I was engaged with students. I asked students to call me Lee, not Dr. Pelton or President Pelton, and most of them did. There were a few who would, that was just too much to ask. But I've been doing that for years, and not because I want them to see me as one of them. I had a friend who was a college president, I won't mention the school, it was a liberal arts college in the Midwest, and he would get out on the quad and do like cartwheels and backflips. And he thought, that would endear him to students. It had the opposite effect. They were saying, old guy, you look really foolish. So I didn't go that far, but his instincts were right. But I spend a lot of time with students. I have students over to the house. I eat in the dining hall with students. I have conversations with them. They come up to I have open office hours, and they come up and put their feet on my coffee table and tell me what I need to do or shouldn't be doing to run the college. And so I develop, and I would encourage other. And I don't want to say that other people aren't, but you're asking me about me. That was a way that I developed some camaraderie with students and with the faculty as well.
There was one thing, obviously, that was reported over and over again, that a lot of these encampments that were pro-Palestinians made Jewish students feel uncomfortable, and there were some really bad people saying horrible anti-Semitic things and stuff. So that's
threatening things.
And that's a difficult balance in a way to have. Kids feel, obviously, anti-Semitism is alive and well in the world, and feel that they were under threat. So what do you do about that?
Well, listen. Many people will say, many Jewish people, my friends, would say, I've not felt this level of anti-Semitism in my lifetime and in the past several months. And I believe that. It's also, I don't want to put an adjective on it, But in this discussion, it's as if October 7th never existed.
Yeah.
It never comes up. Never comes up. And as you said on this show, and I agree that, you know, in order to, you have to be able to have in your head two contradictory perspectives at the same time. That's really hard. But you have to be able to do that. Because there was October 7th, which was horrific. And I've seen many of the unfiltered clips from October 7th, and I was completely horrified by what I saw. And then, of course, now we have, you know, this terrible loss of life and death and hurt and pain in Gaza, in Palestine. So, yeah. So you know, I think it's complex, and what makes it even more complex is that in some of these groups, student groups, and elsewhere, there are Jewish people who are opposed to what's happening.
In Gaza, you're talking about the Palestinians, of course.
And Israel, too.
Yeah, they're opposed to the government. It's government.
And that makes it very complex. And so it's difficult to, I think, see this, you know, as a disjunctive either or, because it is very complex in all sorts of ways, emotionally complex, politically complex, socially complex, and so on.
That was really valuable, I have to say. I really appreciate your time today. Lee Pelton, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Getting a lot of nice text messages from your former students, Lee Pelton. Just want you to know that. Very nice. I've been talking with Lee Pelton. He used to be the president of Emerson College. He is now president and CEO of the Boston Foundation. He was the 12th president, I should say, at Emerson. And he's also a member of GBH's Board of Trustees. Up next.
After that, would you not move him up to number 5 on the most influential list? Maybe even 4.
Maybe even 4. Maybe 3, Jim. Maybe just go out on a limb and go for 3.
Go for 3.
And we're hoping that eventually you get there.
I was there once.
Maybe
I was there once.
Were you there once? Oh, my goodness.
Once.
Maybe they listen to the top 1,000 people in Boston. You can make it.
I don't think I'd make that either. But maybe if they expand a little, maybe
Up
we can.
next, we're going to talk with the conductor of the Boston Pops, Keith Lockhart. He's going to preview the spring season. There are some big names and some really wow concerts planned. He's going to tell us about them. Up next, you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
John Kirby has become the public face of the White House as it navigates the war in Gaza, which means he's on the front lines for criticism.
Kirby, speaking about Israeli victims, has spoken with language that seems uniquely reserved for only one set of victims.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. More on the man explaining and defending the war on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and The Huntington, presenting Tony Stone, the remarkable true story of the first woman to shatter expectations and play pro baseball on a men's team. May 17th through June 16th at the Huntington Theater, huntingtontheater.org.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Mass General Brigham Health Plan, with you every day. For more information, you can visit massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org.
I'm Zoe Matthews, senior producer for Boston Public Radio, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Dregan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. In 15 minutes, the mayor will be here. She'll be with us for an hour from 1 to 2 to answer our questions and yours, including if people have questions here at the library. We're back tomorrow. Then on Friday, it's Doris Kearns Goodwin. We're really excited about that. If you haven't picked up her book, please do. So you definitely know our next guest from things like this. But you might not recognize him from this speech he gave to the Boston Red Sox
all of us learn to tune out the noise. There's always generally people who could never even dream of doing what you guys do.
That, of course, amazingly, is legendary Boston Pops conductor Keith Lockhart. This spring season launches this Friday. Go to bostonpops.org. Keith, it's wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
everybody. And look, the Red Sox are winning.
The Red Sox are winning.
What the hell do you know about baseball?
A lot.
Like what?
Like what? It was all I wanted to be when I was 10 years old.
Is that true, really?
Oh, yeah. Second baseman on the Miracle Mets in 1969.
But you know, you say how many people dream about being a baseball player when they're little. How many musicians dream of playing with the Boston Pops, the Boston Symphony, and so few made the cut. So in many ways, you're talking like creme de la creme at both places.
Well, you know, it was fascinating. Alex Cora and I did a talk together in November about leadership, specifically leadership of teams of people who don't normally think of themselves on teams of all-stars, basically. And we really enjoyed each other and what each other had to say. And he took my cell phone number, and then I got a call in February saying, would you come down and talk to the team and to the coaching staff about your perspective on what we need to be doing? Because he said, you know, this is a weird year. Everybody is new to the club. Nobody believes in us, et cetera, et cetera. So I went down to Fort Myers for 4 days in February, talked to the team. The weird thing about that there would have been fewer pauses in that speech, but I was recorded. That was the end of my locker room speech, which was longer than that. And we talked about how leadership, in my mind, especially when you're dealing with something with people of such super competence on all levels of the pyramid, is more about getting them to forge the connections with each other than just getting them to listen to you as you top down all the time. And the last part of it was about tuning out the noise and realizing, as you know, Theodore Roosevelt famously said, it's not the critic who counts. And then it turned around and somebody sent me this and said, look, you're in the opening day video. Oh. So they just took it and put it in there. And I said, you know, I'm glad to be there. Ask next time.
Did you ever throw out the first pitch? We know you're at Fenway all the time.
I've thrown out the first pitch probably 15 times.
How many times you bounce at the home plate?
Never.
That's not true. Raise your right hand.
He was going to be a
you
second
never
baseman.
bounced the damn ball?
Never bounced the ball.
Wow, that is impressive.
I tend to be high, but not far enough high that the catcher has to get out of the crouch.
Wow.
Very first one I wrote.
Look at him.
Very first one I threw was Doug Mirabelli. Remember him, the guy who used to catch Wakefield? He was catching. And he came out and he said, hey, not bad for a musician. And I said, any chance for me? And he said, keep your day job. And I was like,
but, you know, one last thing before we get to the new season. You know, as I said before, it's really hard to get to be with the Boston Pops, the Boston Symphony. I mean, so these musicians come, I'm sure, from all over the country. They have maybe worked their way up and been, or are they like 20-something phenoms? Or
every player who gets into the Boston Symphony and by extension the Boston Pops is literally representative of thousands of people who didn't make that grade. It's an amazing meritocracy in the upper levels of symphonic musicians. They're really incredible players, and getting them all to want to be on the same team and not always be the person whom everybody else is following is the biggest, you know, it's what we do.
So, manager Keith Lockhart, the Spring Pop starts on Friday. Give us some of the highlights. They're frankly all highlights.
We start on Friday, with Harry Connick Jr., who is his own highlight and highlight reel. I mean, really one of the most talented popular musicians ever, I think. Just really an incredible player. Hasn't been with us in the hall for over 20 years, and that time it wasn't with me. I've worked with him before, but not here. So this is going to be very exciting. And we go through June 8th, and over that period of time, we have 2 movies. We have Jurassic Park, screened in high def on our huge screen and John's score played live by the Boston Pops. We have Encanto for families starting this Saturday matinee and then the week after that. We have the guy, Mark Martel, who voiced Freddie Mercury.
I didn't know that till this morning in the film, for which Rami Malek won the Academy Award.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a great movie.
And if you hear Mark, it's totally like hearing Queen. I mean, it's just amazing. Our first ever Pride Night, which is a long time in coming, but I'm glad it has, on Saturday the 1st of June, the opening day of Pride, featuring an incredibly talented person, a drag performer named Thorgy Thor. whom I didn't know because I'm not a regular viewer of RuPaul's Drag Race, but just blew me away. I mean, incredible talent, a great violinist, which is fascinating and not what you would think. Elsewhere in the news, Eyes of the World, do you know about that one?
This is about D-Day.
It's about, it's the American historian John Monsky, and it's his own personal, really fascinating narrative way of telling the story of America's involvement in the last year of the Second World War, from the D-Day invasion to VE Day. And it's hard to describe how impactful it is. Incredible footage, still pictures, things that really make the history come alive. Told a lot through the voices of people whose voices don't normally get to tell it, like the regiments of still segregated American military forces at that point, and told through the eyes of the war correspondents, spectacular war correspondents like the likes of Ernest Hemingway and Lee Miller and Salinger.
So do you put the, is that one of those things that you have the pictures up behind the orchestra?
Right, it'll be, it's an entire multimedia thing all the way through, and featuring music of the era, music that inspired them, music that was written about the era by Aaron Copland and Richard Rodgers.
You know what you're a genius at, by the way? You really are you nervous?
I think you're a genius.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, well, let's talk about that for a minute. No, you know, your mixed media thing, I have to be honest, I'm often when I come to, like when we came to the Rick Steves thing.
I love the mixed media.
I said, this is not going to work.
Oh, no,
I mean,
it's great.
I love Rick Steves, I love you, I love the orchestra. It was a perfect mixture of film and speaking part and music. I love those kinds of mixed media.
There's so many things we can do these days, and we live in such a visual age. It really gives a chance for a lot of people whom I think have a hard time just taking in audio content. It's a way of really making the music come alive for them, and it's a way of storytelling, which is, I think, what all great music is about.
We're talking to Keith Lockhart, the conductor of the Boston Pops. You can get tickets for the Pops this spring and anytime at bostonpops.org. You mentioned in this press release that Harry Connick Jr. is going to be singing the American Songbooks classics. What are the American Songbook classics? What are those?
Well, I suppose that depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
In Harry Connick's case, this is a really wide-ranging. He's certainly doing some of the New Orleans kind of barrel roll piano stuff that certainly made him famous. I don't know. I'm going to try to get him to do what's the song from When Harry Met Sally, which really put him on the map.
Yeah.
Yep.
The songs of Cole Porter.
So songs we would recognize.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's what we call them.
That's really the canon of songs that have when people say what defines a classic, and I apply that to classical music as well, it's songs that outlived the generation that they were intended for.
So is this 29 or 30 for you?
This is 29. I now can say that with assurance, because people were always saying, let's say in 2015, they said that's your 20th anniversary. I said, well, it's actually, yes, but it's my 21st year because I started in 95. But now, having canceled 2020, it's my 29th season and my 29th.
So how you doing?
I'm doing well, except, you know, this all seems like more work than it did 25 years ago.
But it seems to me, let me speak for Keith Lockhart, that one of the things that keeps you going is everything is new. I mean, obviously, the overture on July 4th is not new, but wildly exciting. Almost everything you do is something different from what came before, which has got to keep you totally excited. And
well, that's the exciting thing about this profession, this business, and also specifically about the Boston Pops, is that particularly our lens is so wide that it includes so many things that you never really feel like, oh God, not that again. And that's a great thing, because I'm one of those people, I'm kind of lazy. I need some jolt of having to learn something new to keep me going.
And you're going to Tanglewood. Tell people who have never been to Tanglewood why they should go.
Tanglewood is a magical place to experience any arts. It's gorgeous. Somehow being in nature and in that beauty and in that wonderful 6,000-seat shed we have there with 10,000 people sitting on the lawn gives you a chance to experience music in a whole new way.
Yeah.
We're there. The Pops is there several times with a couple of great Pops artists. Jason Mraz will be with the Pops, Trey Anastasio from Fish, et cetera, et cetera. I'll be there a couple of times doing Jurassic Park again and doing a show I'm really looking forward to called Broadway Today, where we're going to take a deep dive into post-Sondheim musical theater, 21st century musical theater.
And you can get up there early and walk around these beautiful grounds. Everything is all green and lush, and you can see the practice studios where the musicians practice, and they're absolutely gorgeous, beautifully made studios.
Very much, it's a musical Valhalla.
Yeah.
Now, I know coming today, you said you wanted to comment on Stormy Daniels' testimony, so go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
What is it you wanted to say exactly? Okay,
well, so... I'll say something really quick.
I'm so over this.
Yeah.
I think that's what I was going to say.
You know what I was going to say? I read something very, very sad today. People know that Beethoven was deaf at an early age. And I was reading this morning that it was from, they think it may have been from lead in wine bottles, that the wine bottles were so filled with lead. And that
the glass that leached out over time?
And that was one of the things that caused him to go deaf very early on. And when people would come out toward the end of his career, you know, he would come out to conduct the Ninth Symphony.
When he did the Ninth Symphony at the end, the concertmaster famously had to take him and turn him around so he could see that the audience was
applauding. That's how deaf he was. It was very sad.
Okay, since you don't want to comment on the testimony, yesterday is a big...
I did.
Well, you did, sort of. There was a big takeout on your new boss the other day. We haven't met him yet, Chad Smith.
Yeah.
Marjorie and I both...
It was a great piece.
It was a fabulous piece. Malcolm Gay. The weird thing, though, even though it was a fabulous piece, was neither you nor Andres Nelson's was quoted in the piece. So we figured we'd give you an opera. I know it's... What are you going to say? So what's he like? What's it feel like to have a new boss?
He's really a breath of fresh air. I think he's really the CEO we needed at this particular inflection point in the Boston Symphony's history. He is really, I think, really committed and not just lip service to making this orchestra a vital cultural resource for everybody in the community, as well as all the nuts and bolts of keeping us going through the next budget and then the next payday. He has boundless energy. I think he has not, there's like not a community leader he has not met with in these first few months, but that having been said, he's always approachable and apparently always there. I think he has stunt doubles.
Are you nervous when? I mean, Mark Volpe ran the show for a long time. Are you nervous when there's a new boss?
Well, you know, it's he's I'm nervous more because this is the first time I've had an executive director who is younger than I was. But that will pass, I suppose. That's inevitable.
You know, one last thing for me. How do you put these seasons together every year? Do you have a group and you all sit down and discuss it, or do you decide, or how does it work?
I have a Pops team, a small but mighty team of people who bring ideas to the table. We always have a list of ideas that we have either wanted to do again or that never worked out the first 20 times we tried to do them. And then when we start putting, you know, big things like obviously Harry Connick, he doesn't just show up when you want him to. You know,
no, he doesn't.
And, you know, so we get those things in place, and then we say, how can we, a lot of it is practical because we have X amount of rehearsal time and this many concerts to do. And some of it is also just, are we far-ranging enough? Are we hitting all the points we'd like to hit? And then we argue with marketing, and then we put the, and then we put it out.
Aren't you going to ask your annual question?
No, he screws us every year. I mean, you know, we ask him every year.
This year, Charlie Brown will be different.
Every year, we ask him who's going to come on July 4th. Give us an exclusive. He says he can't. He then says he'll call us, and we hear him on some other radio show telling what the deal is.
Invite me back at the right time.
When is the right time? July 3rd?
I would say it would be right around the day we do the announcement.
Right around the day we do the announcement.
You should know, by the way, you are not first today. I've been asked by ROR and
we don't care if you're. We don't care what we are. But are we friends, all of us? Are we friends?
Yes, this is the place I would prefer.
Absolutely.
Okay, so are you going to do it there, here?
No.
No, okay, fine. Before you go, Mayor Wu's not in the room, is she, unfortunately? But we can repeat this to her. One of the best things I've been to at Symphony Hall in the last year or so was Concert for the City, where Mayor Wu in this blue dress, she was terrified,
really
by the way. She took to the stage. Was it Mozart she played?
She did, yes. She didn't seem like she was terrified, actually. I thought it was... It was great. I mean, I've obviously met Mayor Wu before this, and we'd talked and all, but to have a civic leader of this level of a city be that involved and that good and that brave is really something. It really said a lot for what she will stand for.
Yeah, she's another genius, I think.
No, it was beautiful. It was beautifully, I don't know from anything, it was beautifully performed, and the whole thing was great. Keith, congratulations on the spring season. It's great to see you as always.
It's always great to see you guys.
Thank you very much, Keith Lockhart. We have been speaking with Boston Pops conductor Keith Lockhart about his new season, the spring season. To get tickets for the spring season and for Tanglewood, I assume, both, you go to bostonpops.org.
bostonpops.org or tanglewood.org. They all go the same place.
Okay,
Big
tanglewood.org or bostonpops.org if you want to be in the city, and tanglewood.org if you want to be up there in the Berkshires, which is absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much, Keith Lockhart.
Good to see you, Keith. Thanks so much.
Okay, up next we're going to be talking to the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu, who did perform at Symphony Hall, and she was not spectacular. I suppose you're not that surprised by that. I'm certainly not. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
There was slavery in Massachusetts.
From GBH News, I'm Soraya Wintersmith. Join me for What is Owed, a podcast exploring how one of America's oldest cities is figuring out its reparations debt.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms. And Revision Energy. Sunbug Solar is now part of Revision Energy, a solar installer committed to being a renewable energy partner for New England and working to fight climate change. Learn more at sunbugsolar.com.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browder are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Conductor
goodness.
of the Boston
Thank
Pops,
you,
Mayor
Wu.
Wu, just was saying your performance in concert for the city was brilliant and courageous. Look at the face she's making. Please join us in welcoming Michelle Wu.
Hello.
How are you?
Thank you.
I think the music critic that the paper sent said it was competent or something.
No, he said
It was great.
You
I was
wowed him.
there. It was
he
fabulous.
said you wowed him. He thought it was very courageous, he said as well.
What'd you bring?
So these are special plants that we have been giving out at our neighborhood coffee hour series. So we go to a park in every single neighborhood in this set of weeks and bring all of our cabinet members out, have information tables, and residents who come while supplies last get these special seedlings that were grown in the city's parks greenhouse, and then they get out to the community. And I got this today too from little Ellis, who came to our Jamaica Plain neighborhood coffee hour. He gave me this beautiful bead necklace he had made, and then promptly asked for a new basketball hoop to be a lower basketball hoop to be installed. So I was like, very good.
So while you mention these things, tell people they're going on from they started at the end of April, they're going to June 26th, and how do people find out about them?
You can go to the city website. They're all posted. We've probably had 4 or 5 so far, so some of the neighborhoods have already had theirs, but many of them are still upcoming, and you can show up with questions. There's usually a survey for each neighborhood that goes out ahead of time, so you can submit some questions, and I will read them and ask them no matter how intense they may be, and it's a chance to give feedback directly to department heads and city team members.
We intended to get to this later, but since you brought these neighborhood coffee hours thing, talk about 2 other things that are happening in the community as the weather is nicer for one day. Both the Open Streets program, which we talk to you about every year and we love, and obviously you've spread it into the neighborhoods. Also tell us when you're going to announce what's happening on Newbury Street, and also these block party grants that you are handing out.
Yeah, we had the first of our Open Streets events just this past weekend, and the premise is that streets are actually public space, even though you don't think of it when you're trying to dodge traffic or make sure your kids don't run into the roadway. But when we close off major roadways to vehicular traffic for a number of hours, then small businesses set up tables, community organizations bring music and dance and chessboards, and it's beautiful for every generation to come together. And so there are 7 locations this year. It's expanded since last year, and those are also up on the city website. We just had Dot Ave, and it will rotate through Roxbury, East Boston, Hyde Park, Alston Brighton, Jamaica Plain, and I think I'm forgetting one. But those will come up monthly. And then in terms of block parties, I've always said the best, easiest, most immediate step to save democracy is to host a block party. It's what gets us to really connect with our neighbors and people you might vote differently from or worship differently from or speak a different language from, but all have the same stake in that place. And so block parties can be the foundation to go out and get to know each other and then keep coming together on issues. And the city now is offering mini grants. So we will supply some of the funds so you can buy the hot dogs or the popsicles if you will create the flyer, drop it off at all of your neighbors' doors, and make sure that everyone comes together.
When are you announcing the Newbury Street situation? Have you already?
We have not. We will definitely have Open Newbury this year. We have not settled yet on the number of weekends. So we just actually had in the library, we had a meeting with the Newbury Street businesses who wanted to give us some feedback on how sometimes there had been several, you remember last summer, it rained almost every weekend straight, and that when we actually shut down the traffic and then it rained and no one came and there was no parking, it was very difficult for them. So we were trying to think about practices this year to accommodate for rain days and all that. We were almost close to figuring out then how many days.
One place apparently you will not be having an Open Streets is on Hanover Street. Can you explain why? This may be an impossible question. Every time I read an article either criticizing you or criticizing the restaurant owners or the neighbors for being too insular about the North End not being part of the ability to do restaurants out on patios, out on the streets, etc., the one neighborhood, I don't understand why a deal hasn't been cut after 2 years. I mean, maybe that's an unfair question, but...
No, it's not unfair. I'll say, so the starting premise is that, again, block parties, events where public spaces are there to bring people together, that's what we try to do everywhere it is physically possible to do it. We also have to work within the exact parameters of our very historic neighborhoods. The North End is the neighborhood that has the narrowest sidewalks with the greatest density of restaurants on top, with residents on top, and no alleys for parking for residents' cars. And so when you take up the entirety of, to allow restaurants to have outdoor dining in the North End, the sidewalk's too narrow to put it on the sidewalk, and so it has to go into the street. That's the only place. And with so many restaurants, it means the entirety of both sides of the street, the parking is gone, and that for residents, they have no other place to park, and so then you have to find garages and this and that and the other. So there are some more implications there than in other places. Is there a solution for the North End? I believe that there is a solution for every space. It has to be targeted there because it is so unique, which would mean specific conversations with restaurants, with residents. We have had so many public meetings, but we haven't yet gotten into that level of specificity. And now that there's been a lawsuit, we had a compromise one year where there was a charge so that that would offset the ability to provide parking and cleaning and this, not the other. And some of the same restaurant owners who supported the compromise then later sued us to get their money back and were suing about the compromise. And so now we are in litigation again, which just makes it impossible to have the kind of direct conversations needed to come up with a targeted solution.
So is it possible your tenure here that this can go on, the stalemate, for the whole time, however long that is that you're mayor?
I mean, we've been through one round of litigation, and the court very clearly stated that it is within the city's rights to regulate our roadways. They are not private property.
I'm not talking about I don't mean the legal.
But as long as we are, and then there was a second round. And so, I'm not exactly sure why we are still kind of facing litigation when so much has been decided and it is clear. And, I would love to get to a different place. But I think, frankly, there are, maybe some might see some benefit in constantly being in the news in this way as advertisements for this or that. But the residents, by and large, do not want this, right? The residents, it would be a compromise of an asking of sacrifice for the neighborhood residents to give up parking to deal with trash, noise, congestion, the sidewalks being very dangerous because then the servers are having to bring the food from inside restaurants constantly across the sidewalks to the patios. And so it does affect daily life there much more than in other places. And we have a democratically accountable system. All of the elected officials have gotten together and said, this is a system that is, we can't do it in the same way as other neighborhoods. And unfortunately, or fortunately, litigation and, continuing to push down a certain path isn't the way to affect policy, but we will have to deal with the litigation as it comes to us.
The number is 877-301-8970. We'll get to your calls and texts in just a minute.
Just one quick thing before we do. We're in the middle of all these college protests now involving the situation in Gaza, and you agreed with Police Commissioner Cox for the police to go in to a public right-of-way. Emerson College, they went in with riot gear at 2 o'clock in the morning to remove an encampment there. I think there were 118 arrests. Why did you think that was the way it had to happen?
Well, and this is, okay, I'll just start. This is semantics, but I think for this audience in particular, and the chance to get into some details is really liberating for me to be able to share in some depth. And so the officers weren't necessarily in riot gear. Some of the officers were wearing helmets, some were not. But when there is full riot gear, it's a very different situation. There was no mace or chemical agents or anything of that nature that was involved. So that sort of separates it from large crowd control, dangerous situations. But all of that aside, this is a city where we are very proud of speaking our minds and of public demonstrations that have taken place in Boston that have changed the course of history. Right? We have thousands of protests and rallies and demonstrations every single year in Boston that take place without incident. And it is the city's, the police department's responsibility to uphold the right to express your views in First Amendment and to protest and all of that. Where there are some parameters is that it cannot violate or conflict with public safety. And the city has an ordinance that is meant to protect public health and safety around encampments and tents. It has been used to maintain the progress to connect people to housing and shelter and services rather than live in unsafe conditions on the street in the cold with no running water, with no heat. And maintaining that has been very important for the city. In this particular case, we communicated with the school and with the organizers on the ground that there was no issue whatsoever with people being in that alleyway with the protest happening there 24 hours a day. The only issue was around tents that were starting to increase in number and then block the public doorways and access to the state transportation building and different offices and coming and going on that right of way. And so over the course of multiple days, the city worked with the school officials to communicate directly to say, if you just take down the tents, no other issues are there. We do not want to be involved on the city side at all. The school even said to the student organizers, if you take down the tents, we will make warming rooms available inside that you can come and go 24 hours a day so you don't have to worry about being cold or anything like that. And the response was that the students, the organizers wanted to get arrested and would keep the tents up to get arrested. And you know, I have participated in civil disobedience in the past as well. I understand that part of the point of protests and part of the point of civil disobedience that has been important to our country's history can be to provoke or to draw attention with an incident that leads to an interaction with law enforcement. And so the challenge about being a police officer and having a city set of standards is that we cannot inconsistently enforce the law. We can't tell our unhoused residents, you need to move into shelter and let us connect you with resources, and you can't live in an encampment on the street. We've had, after the latest mobilization in November to connect everyone to shelter and take down all the encampments, there have been no more tents and encampments in the city. There have been over 30 different instances where the ordinance has been implemented to prevent new encampments from springing up. We cannot say to unhoused residents, you have to comply with this ordinance that is on the books for health and safety. But if you are a student or if you are for a cause that we agree with, then we're going to look the other way. But that was communicated over and over and over again over the course of multiple days with many opportunities to say, please just comply with the ordinance, get rid of the fire hazard, create public access, and there's no issue whatsoever with protest. Ultimately, again, a decision that the situation could not go on any longer because we had tried just about every way to de-escalate and communicate that. And the job of police officers, even when someone wants to get arrested, is to keep them safe. Even when they want to get arrested and are escalating with physical force or even verging on violence at the officers, it is still the job of our police to keep them safe throughout that interaction. And that's what makes that role so difficult and also so important. We have body cameras on all Boston police officers, and so there's a thorough review of every interaction that happens.
When are they going to be available, by the way?
There's hundreds of hours that we are working through right now. There's some overhead video that we are working through as well, just to make sure we understand the interaction. I have seen some of it so far, including the opening moments where there was another clear attempt to de-escalate with the students, and it was met with sort of interlocking of arms and a choice that they wanted to have that interaction.
We want to get to callers, just a couple of quick things. One of the things I think you were looking into, your office looking into as well, was the police in one statement said there were no injuries to the people who were in camp there, and then there's allegedly a video or audio of the person in command there asking a question of another police officer about whether the two injured people, if they've made it to the hospital or some such thing. Where does the truth lie there?
Yeah, I did look into that. So I wanted to see, because there was also a video floating out there that several people have referenced to me at our coffee hours and other locations where it's someone kind of filming the power washing of the area the next morning, and the kind of video zooms in on what looks like blood on the street there. And so people have said, there was so much violence that blood was shed. I will say, in terms of official injuries, and we have scoured both with EMS and reviewing all the records, there were no hospitalizations documented, no transports or hospitalizations from those who were arrested that evening. There was one report of someone who said they had shoulder pain, but they declined medical treatment because they wanted to get booked first. That doesn't mean that people didn't then seek treatment afterwards. But in terms of that moment in the records that we have, there were no hospitalizations or medical transports. There were several officers who were injured, broken ankle, broken foot, shoulder situation that may need surgery. So it definitely involved situations of force in terms of when students or demonstrators are interlocked and resisting arrest. It does require some to do what they need to do.
Before we move ahead quickly, give us a couple examples of things where you engage in civil disobedience. You mentioned it.
Well, I've been part of climate events in the past. I never, there are, many times there's sort of within the movement of folks who are trying to draw attention to an issue. There are those who are there for support. There are those who are there to choose to be arrested with a whole separate training on how to do that and whether, and you make decisions all along the way. So I never wanted to be involved to be arrested, but I have been present when the streets were blocked off to make a point about climate change, for example, or out in West Roxbury when there was a gas pipeline being installed and part of the demonstrations out there.
Should you have been arrested when you blocked the street, just like the students were on the alleyway to the transportation center? You were doing a variation on what they were doing, weren't you?
So there are multiple situations where where streets have been blocked off, even recently, about what's happening in Gaza or Palestine. More often than not, there are not arrests that are associated with that because officers, whenever possible, will try to de-escalate and give people a chance to leave. Even at Emerson, there's body camera footage documenting the conversation before, saying we just want everyone to disperse, create public access. We don't want to arrest anyone. But the decision was to lock arms and stay and choose to face arrest.
Fair enough. Let's go to Lorraine in Brighton. You've been very patient. You're on with the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. Hi, Lorraine.
Hi. Before I speak to the mayor, Jim, I wanted to wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you. Very kind.
And
happy birthday.
Then I have my questions for Mayor Will.
Thank you.
How are you this afternoon, Mayor?
Great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So this is my annual call about roads, rats, and swimming pools. And I hope it won't have to be an annual call forever. Regardless and irrespective of how much trash collection there is throughout the city and how frequent, I still do not understand why covered trash cans are not required, so that people are not putting out their black plastic bags full of food for the rats.
I like that question. So let's see if we can get an answer to that.
Was there
Lorraine.
a swimming pool part to it?
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to go on to my second question.
Well,
Please, Mayor.
No, tell us your second question so the mayor can answer them both. Go.
Thank you. My second question has to do with the roads, which are increasingly impassable. The potholes finally have gotten patched up. They're in areas where the roads really need to be completely repaved. I did bring this to the mayor's attention a year ago, right after pothole season, and I was told to stay on the line and my information would be transmitted to her staff. I never got a call back. I called GBH back. They said they would communicate. I never got a call back. And the roads are not getting any better.
Lorraine, I would
really like that address.
Before the mayor answers, do stay on the line. And this time, we will all get back. So stay on hold. We'll get your contact information. Mayor Wu.
And before I jump into the big question, can you specify, just give me one road that you're talking about, so I'll at least have that?
Sure. Kinross, Kinross.
Okay,
runs from Commonwealth Avenue to Sutherland.
Thanks, Lorraine.
So thank you. In terms of what is usually called containerization in the field, the requirement to have trash be in closed containers, it's definitely a street cleanliness issue, and it is, as you said, it is definitely a rat issue as well. This is probably the leading action that can be taken that could start to change the dynamic on rodents, which we know has the shape of that problem has shifted a lot since the pandemic. We are seeing, as in many cities, more rodents out in more residential areas and not just in sort of downtown commercial areas, because so many of the food patterns shifted during the pandemic. The kind of animals patterns went with them and have stayed. So we actually have been thinking about how to incorporate this into our trash contract, it's definitely a balance. We are coming up on the renegotiation and expiration of a multi-year trash contract, so this would be a good moment to put some of this in. There are multiple kind of increasing intensity of actions related to trash that could be implemented in policy. One is just requiring containers. We have many residents for whom having the purchase cost of a container would be a lot and a burden, and so we'd have to think about then how to make that affordable, or how the city would then contribute to it, and do we replace it? And so there's some additional budgeting that would have to be done. There are some neighborhoods in the city where there's simply not room for that container to be stored inside a garage or other structure, and some of the neighborhoods that would need it most in terms of protecting against rodents are actually the ones where it would be hardest to figure out where those containers would go, like the North End, for example. Some cities are trying to do large sort of group containers where there's a larger dumpster on the street and it's locked and everyone has the code and can put it in. So it can just require levels of what would turn into barriers for quick access, and we want to balance all of that. There's also, kind of one more level up would be pay as you throw, right? This, just to be clear, this isn't something that we are putting a proposal on the table yet, but in terms of researching both for sustainability and reducing waste that goes into landfill and cost effectiveness of the city's systems and protection against rats, there are many communities around the country that have basically a limit on, you get a certain number of bags that are this size and you pay for any additional trash that you generate above and beyond that. We have a food composting program right now that still has capacity. If anyone is interested, you can go on the city website and still sign up for curbside composting, and that helps to divert some of the waste and turn it into compost and a more climate-friendly use of it. And that also saves the city in terms of just making sure that we're not putting that towards the trash contract as well. And then in terms of roads, I will follow up on Kinross so I can figure out, and I will make sure that we connect with you to tell you what the timeline might be and if it's feasible.
Lorraine, don't go away. We're going to get your information, and this time you're going to hear. Thanks so much for the call. Megan in Boston, you're on with the mayor.
Hi, Mayor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm just calling. I'm interested in your commitment to librarians in Boston Public Schools and the funding. I know that we've been to the budget committee and we have made statements repeatedly, and there has been no commitment made for the funding. And with it passing next week, I'm wondering on a one-on-one what you can say on what you're thinking about that, because it's crucial in Boston Public Schools that we all have librarians.
Yes.
Amen.
I completely agree with you. As someone who grew up spending a lot, libraries were my safe and happy place, and having that accessible at the school building and ideally connected to the larger library system to access all the materials is the vision that we want to have for every school. That is still the stated commitment. I need to check. I don't have the details off the top of my head about where we are in phasing that in and how much further we need to do to find dollars to make it possible. But I will look into that later today with the superintendent, just so I understand for next time.
Megan, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. Good luck.
We're getting some texts about the drag racing that was going on in the Back Bay, Marlborough Street. I think it was Marlborough and Dartmouth, where people were flying down the street. What was going on there?
It was an incredibly dangerous situation. There were a number of people who blocked off access to the roadway and then were essentially doing sort of stunts and recording that. It seems like it's sort of a thing that can happen in different places. A group that sort of travels from place to place to do that. It is a violation of course, our road safety laws, but it puts everyone's lives at risk, the people doing that in the street and also anyone in the area. And so BPD is following up on that. There have been license plates that have been identified and working with regional partners across the region, because this has happened in a couple different places from, I think, some of the same vehicles, and they are going to hold them accountable.
So we don't know yet who they are and where they're from?
We have most of the information internally already. Yeah, many are from out of state.
By the way, it's really scary. I don't know if you've ever been in somewhere where they're happening.
I never
by.
had.
It's terrifying. Before we take a break, we have discussed the whole steward nightmare with everybody from Brian McGrory, who wrote the brilliant pieces about the abject greed of the CEO de la Torre with his yachts and multi-million-dollar yachts. We've never talked. I realize we've been remiss. 2 of the 8 hospitals in Massachusetts are yours.
Yes.
They're in Boston.
Kearney
Are you
and
involved
St.
in these discussions? What are you doing around potential closure, denial of service? Obviously, they filed for bankruptcy yesterday, I assume, as everybody knows. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, it's many, many residents in the city who rely on St. Elizabeth's and Kearney for everything that they need for their health care, and then many, many families who are able to put food on the table because of jobs at these institutions as well. And so I think those are the 2 main categories that we cannot let these health care institutions close. They could be merged with another local partner who could sustain them and keep them open, or they could be sort of taken over by someone else. And the governor and I know many of the groups that are representing all the different staff who are involved have been in close contact with us. We continue to try to monitor. Some of this was seeing which path it was going to go down, whether bankruptcy or something that was going to require more direct state legal action. But at least that next step is clear. And the hope is that in a healthcare hub, there would be enough resources and that there can be the kind of coordination to transition a situation like this.
Have you been assured? I mean, if it turns out there's not a buyer or a willing merger partner, then theoretically, without the state running in, the places could close, which would be a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, there are some partners that could do this if they wanted to. There are other partners that might want to, but not have the funding to do it on their own. And then it becomes and then there are sort of different groups that want to take different pieces of things. So I think my focus is on continuity and stability for the patients who are accessing care there and for the workforce that is very much necessary for the city that's there. And so, I want to, wherever possible, help support any of the conversations, but much of this is within the state's legal purview.
Would you be happier if there are no for-profit hospitals in Boston and the state?
I mean, we have seen how destructive and how much even the standards that were supposed to apply here were blatantly circumvented out of pure greed and profit. And it's just, I mean, it's a model that I'm not sure how this person and entity could get away with it across so many different jurisdictions, the same playbook over and over and over again. So I think a lot of people are also looking to make sure that there is a lot of accountability in this particular case too. We're talking to the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. She's going to be with us till the top of the hour. We'll try to get in as many calls and texts excuse me, as we can at 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, as society continues to skew toward virtual experiences, writer A.J. Jacobs likes to do things literally. He has tried to follow the Bible literally, hence his best-selling book, The Year of Living Biblically. Now his latest endeavor is to live the Constitution as literally as possible. He joins us to talk about his latest book, The Year of Living Constitutionally. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Mass General Brigham Health Plan, with you every day. For more information, you can visit massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org. And National Grid, helping businesses work toward a sustainable future by offering guidance on heat pump solutions. Learn more about how heat pumps can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions at ngrid.com/future.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Egan live at the Boston Public Library. Mayor Michelle Wu is kind enough to join us for her monthly Ask the Mayor. She is with us till the end of the show, and you can speak to her at 877-301-8970. Paul from West Roxbury, you're on with the mayor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor. As you know, your administration and the City Council have begun deliberations on the new budget, capital and operating budget for the coming fiscal year. To his credit, our new City Councilor, Ben Weber, held a town meeting recently where he solicited questions and suggestions for either or both budgets. It was a great idea. By the way, I think he's doing a great job. My question, which surprised him a bit, was whether we could expect the various line departments, Public Works, Parks and Playgrounds, Transportation, Public Facilities, whether there was any reason we couldn't ask them to share with the community, share with Ben, other city councilors, what they have in mind, what they're proposing for the next year, 3 or 5 years, the capital budget. Ben wasn't sure at first, but has since checked and has found out that it is possible. I'm not sure where that effort stands, but shouldn't it be possible for those departments to be expected to share what they have in mind for communities? I mean, your previous caller talking about Kenross Street might have been pleased to see that Kenross Street was on the budget from the Public Works Department for a reconstruction project, that sort of thing. So I just wanted to confirm that that was a practice that the city could endorse and support.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, absolutely, Paul. Thank you for your question, and I will pass along the words in case Ben isn't listening. In fact, the capital budget is a 5-year look ahead. So sometimes things will still kind of come in and out as, let's say, funding for design leads to a projected budget that is higher than anticipated, and then we have to figure out how to cover the rest of it, or let's say the design process ends up taking longer than anticipated. But the idea is that while the operating budget is for the next fiscal year, the capital budget is a 5-year plan. And in fact, we have really even stretched it a little bit, so it's now even going beyond a little bit beyond 5 years. And so everything that is there, if you go to the city's website, I'm sure this current fiscal year's version is still up there, you can see every project that is outlined that is in there for funding in either the design, the budgeting, or construction phase, and sort of the anticipated costs that are associated with it. Those are for the specific projects that are usually infrastructure or buildings or parks that are coming out of the capital budget. Sometimes there are things that are from the operating budget. For example, road reconstruction, road resurfacing tends to be out of the operating budget, out of a fund, and that we just sort of go and as far as that can take us throughout the year, or sidewalk and crosswalk repair, speed humps. Our departments are moving more and more towards even laying that out in a list so that can be accessible. Some of our, if you look up speed humps on the city website, it does start to lay out where we are projected to do that moving forward. But sometimes there are some buckets, and road resurfacing is a good example of this, where it's not always laid out in exact detail over multiple years, because we need to kind of see the condition of the roads year to year, and also then see how much budget is left after certain portions are done, depending on how severe it ends up being.
Paul, thanks for the call. Mayor Wu, I'm sure you're counting the days, because we are, until the legislature takes its much-needed 5-month vacation starting in August. It's less than 3 months. You've got a bunch of stuff up there that it seems to me is pretty critical to what you're trying to do, from the real estate transfer tax, which would purely be a local option, wouldn't affect anybody outside of Boston, but they got to approve it. This transfer of the tax burden to the commercial side to spare the residential side, and a whole host of things. Do you have any...
Rent control, too.
Liquor licenses.
Liquor license. Do you have any concrete commitment from either of the leaders that any of these things are going to happen before they disappear?
I think we've gotten some very hopeful signs. Some of this is really the negotiation between the two chambers themselves, and so neither one alone can actually promise anything in some cases. I think we have heard that there's great interest in wanting to address the disparities that the liquor licensing system has presented, and there have been continued conversations on that front, sort of tweaking the proposal and trying to get a little bit more into the details. The transfer fee was in, the governor included that in our housing bond bill, and so that is firmly in the conversation, although again, it still could be reshaped. The tax shift is actually not up on Beacon Hill yet because it's a home rule petition, so it has to get passed through the city council first. We just filed it fairly recently, and they had their hearing, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago. So there may even still be a working session, I'm not sure, but we will have to go through the council first on that before it gets up there.
You worried these things are not going to... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't, when we talk about the crises that are facing Massachusetts and Boston, housing is the top of the list all the time.
Yeah.
Our colleague, Adam Riley, who's done a lot of reporting on this, points out that the rent control request from you and the city council was filed in April 2023. So, I mean, that's a year and a month, and we're in an emergency situation. There's nothing more on what's going to happen.
A lot of landlords up there on Beacon Hill.
There are a lot of landlords up there. Frankly, I don't think they should be able to vote on this if you own more than $5 million of rental property, and a lot of them own a lot more than that. But in any case, that's almost negligent.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of there's some misinformation out there because let's say on the rent stabilization proposal, every landlord that I talk to, when I say, "Do you raise your rents more than 10% a year?" They say, "No, of course not. That would drive tenants out. That's bad business. That I keep my tenants there, and I understand that you have to have reasonable increases." And so it's really more of a guardrails proposal, but the moment anyone hears the term without looking into the details of it, sometimes there's a very strong reaction, and in politics that can govern how the mood and the general interpretation is. On some of these other issues, transfer fee, liquor licenses, we are going to continue to push as hard as we can on Boston. I don't have to necessarily understand what the impacts will be on other communities that are trying to then move their own transfer fees or their own liquor licenses, right? If it were up to me, cities would get to decide everything that that impacts us here. But we have a different system, and we're working within the one that exists, and we are going to do the best to advocate for what ultimately not only helps Boston, but then ends up feeding into the economic vitality and stability, affordability of the entire region and state.
What do you say about the legislature when you're home with your husband alone? Come on, tell us.
Pillow talk is not for public consumption.
Let's go to Quentin. Quentin in Mission Hill. You're on with Mayor Michelle Wu. Hi. Quentin.
Hi. Mayor Wu, you had previously said that new projects should reflect the style of the neighborhood. It should fit in with the style of the neighborhood. In Mission Hill, your administration has permitted projects that really are rather out of context. They're out of style. They're out of scale with the neighborhood. The neighborhood has fairly low-rise Victorian buildings, and these are anything but. One developer said that they were going to make the top of the building gray because around here there are gray shingles, but they were not shingles. There are other more egregious examples. How can we get the developers to conform with what your rather sensible criteria and which matches our own?
Quentin, thank you.
Thank you. It would be helpful to get some detail on which projects you're talking about in particular. I know sometimes there are certain parts of the city where there were projects already in the pipeline and we are kind of finishing that off rather than starting from scratch. Sometimes it's a mix of different kinds of heights and uses that have come together over multiple recent decades that has kind of contributed to a new mix for the neighborhood. Mission Hill, I know, has felt like there's been a whole, with the hospitals and many of the institutions in the area, that neighborhood in particular has experienced a lot of taller and higher scale changes into the neighborhood. And there's a really set of fantastic local organizations that are working closely with the city on the balance between creating more housing and more affordable housing so that we can keep our residents here in the city, and also being able to protect and maintain the historic character and nature of what makes our neighborhoods feel special. So I would say, of course, a good time to engage is in the public meetings around different projects, but also if you're interested in the big picture, getting involved with Mission Hill, the neighborhood housing group, or getting involved in the historic preservation organization is a good way to kind of be involved proactively all the time.
Quentin, thank you much for the call. Can we ask a couple of quick transportation questions? There's a piece by Taylor Dolvin in the transportation writer for the Globe this morning about congestion pricing beginning in June in New York City. $15. Well, it depends on where you're going, what time of day, et cetera. But you have to pay to enter the downtown area most of the day. And she mentions that it's not under serious consideration here. Why isn't it?
Well, I think the city council had some hearings on, or they at least had filed a hearing order. I don't remember if the hearings actually happened. The state is in the midst of continuing their transportation finance task force or commission, so they are evaluating and putting together a strategy. I would say that one big difference between New York or London, for example, where there's also congestion pricing, and Boston, is that there's and maybe local residents there would disagree, but from my perspective, it does feel like there's a greater reliability and accessibility of non-driving options in those places, which are known for having sort of very comprehensive public transportation systems. When we say there's a congestion pricing proposal, there's a number of different goals that could be for. It could be just to discourage driving and therefore reduce pollution and reduce traffic at all costs, or it could be to try to change people's behavior and encourage other ways of getting into the city. If it is about changing that behavior, knowing that the people who will be hit hardest by congestion pricing are those who can't afford other options and would then have to rely on taking a train to a bus to a this and that, the best thing that we could do, I think everything should be on the table, first of all, for transportation financing. And I completely, I would say that all of our risks and worries about downtown and the vitality of our economy with office buildings, all of the issues about housing, it ultimately is still connected to transportation reliability. And the number one thing that I hear from large employers and their employees is, I don't want to come in person to work because I'm not sure I can get there, or it takes an hour and a half, or I have to catch this one train, otherwise I'm going to have to wait for another 90 minutes. And so if we could figure out a way to really accelerate our transportation infrastructure, Phil Lang is doing the best that any human could do, but we have to do more, and we have to make sure he has the resources to do that. So it should all be on the table. But congestion pricing is a different conversation when there's a very convenient alternative to driving.
Everything should be on the table. Does that include tolls on the northern border to New Hampshire?
Everything should be on the table.
One last question. The only bus I ride, I'm embarrassed, is the number 1. And you have 3 free buses. There's a piece in the Globe about how Cambridge is at least considering, or at least looking into the issue of paying to make the number 1 bus free. But for it to happen, Boston would probably have to partner with them. Would you?
Yeah, in fact, when our other 3 bus routes launched, we had set aside some funding out of our federal recovery dollars to try to do something cross municipalities. And at that moment, under previous leadership at the state level, we were denied, and they said they were not going to consider a collaboration that would involve the 1 bus. And so we had actually moved it along quite some bit then, and the T said they weren't interested. Now, it's a different administration, different day, and they've been much more collaborative with allowing municipalities to take the lead and bring new ideas and new funding to the table. At this point, though, some of our funding has been pushed to continue the pilots on these 3 buses. We were hoping that there could have been more resources available from the state or from the federal government, but there's a lot of strain. And so, for now, we are looking to find ways that we could identify funding sources, but it's a great idea. It's a very, very well-used route. It would benefit a lot from having all-door boarding and free entry because there are long lines and people could then get on and it could move faster. That's why I think free fares on buses is the ideal place to start because it comes with so many operational benefits as well.
One more transportation thing is that texters want to know about these motorized scooters, ones that are food delivery scooters and ones that are just people are riding around on, claims of no license plates, no running lights. What are the rules for those scooters that you see all over the place?
In bike lanes too, by the way.
They're in bike lanes and on sidewalks.
I know we've been having some conversations about state legislation. I can't remember if I don't think the scooters, okay, I need to double check on this, but I do not think that the scooters are within the category that need to be licensed, have a license plate and are, basically counted as cars versus bicycles. I think that that's definitely an area where regulations could be different or be more specific. Some of this is new technology that I think, we even had to have state legislation to allow for micro-mobility devices. The other, there are multiple kinds of scooters I think that people are talking about. And those can be really important for the first or last mile to connect to public transportation or other locations. And again, the more ways we can move people on our streets more effectively, the better all of us and our economy will be. One final note, if I could double back on free buses, actually,
Sure.
On the one bus and the others, there was a lot of research done in years past around what the cost would actually be, and I think our numbers back up that it would actually be. Anyway, the estimate was that it would be about $30 million for the entire MBTA system's buses to be free, and then another $30 million for the entire rest of the state's public transit bus systems, their RTAs, regional transit authorities, to be free as well. So I know, there's so many costs on the table, but sometimes I think people don't realize how inexpensive it actually is to replace the fares on buses. It's $60 million for the entire state. And in fact, if we were to get rid of the cost of having to collect fares, that dollar amount would be even lower.
Let's go to David in a car. You're on with the mayor of the city of Boston. Welcome.
Mayor, good afternoon. Very quick transportation question. Why, with all of the technology, can we not automatically fine people who block the box or run lights?
Amen.
Now I'll hang up.
Thank you, David. Yeah, this is, we need legislative action to allow for that. There are actually multiple proposals up at the State House for consideration. One is that MBTA buses would be able to, and school buses, but MBTA buses would be able to have cameras installed on the front of the bus so that as they're driving in their own bus lanes, any vehicle that is in the way, the license plate would be automatically captured. There's been push in the past around having that happen installed on streetlights so that it could be for red light violations. Sometimes people have said, well, does that raise concerns about surveillance and other issues? And I think we definitely have to be careful about privacy issues and civil rights. On the other hand, we've also heard from some communities who say actually removing the bias out of direct interactions and just having it be clear and everyone's vehicle automatically who has a violation automatically gets a ticket, that would in some ways be the most effective and unbiased way of issuing these violations altogether.
What do you think about a well-respected radio talk show host who admits publicly she drives in the bus lane? What would you just a hypothetical, Marjorie?
Only on the Huntington
Come on, Mayor. What do you think of that? Reprehensible, right?
I think she made up for it because I was very excited to see the app that she has to tell all different plants. And
that's right, but it's not working here. It's not working here in the library. I've been trying to take pictures of these plants to figure out what they are, but it tells me my connection is not good enough, so I don't have a good enough connection. But what are you going to do with the Vatican?
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that.
We are headed to meet the Pope. The governor and I are going to attend and represent Massachusetts at the Pope's Summit for Climate Change. We'll be joined by UMass Boston Chancellor Marcelo Suarez Orozco and several students from the BCLA McCormick High School. So very proud.
Gina McCarthy told us on Friday she's going to be there too.
Oh,
former
wonderful.
head of the EPA.
Yeah. Great. So Massachusetts will be well represented. And the goal is to showcase not only what Boston is doing and doing well, but also how urgent it is as a coastal community, and the need for all of us to be doing our part on a very big and important issue.
So are these people from all over the country, or is
all
it
over
just
the world?
All over the world. So it's going to be a big crowd.
Have you met the Pope?
I have not.
What's that? I mean, what do you think about that?
I'm still not quite sure if the Pope will actually be at any of the presentations, or if it's just sort of something that his team is convening. But
we said on Friday when we were at UMass Boston with the Chancellor and with the Governor and with Gina McCarthy, that Bill McKibben, who's a monthly guest on our show, who's one of the most important environmental leaders in the world, said that the Pope's, what's it called?
Laudate Si.
Maybe one of the most important documents on climate that has ever been drafted.
When he makes a statement and has pushed into issues around social justice in particular, and about climate, it just brings a different lens in terms of the moral urgency of these issues. And so I'm very excited. The kids and my family are also coming.
Oh, great.
We will be spending some time. There are some local communities in the Rome area that have strong ties to communities, Italian immigrant communities in Boston.
Oh,
and there are some other local events that we will be attending, and we'll also get to show the kids where their grandparents or their grandmother and great-grandparents are originally from. So
that's neat. That's neat.
Mayor Wu, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks
as always.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Mayor Wu coming in. She comes with us once a month to take our questions and yours. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions and text, but we did the best we could. Thank you all for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thanks to people who came down to the Boston Public Library. Really appreciate
that. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, which is called Boston Public Radio.
That's amazing.
Tune in tomorrow. We'll be back here at the Boston Public Library with Harvard National Security expert Juliette Kayyem.
Interesting. What's going on around